Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was Fairy King Harlequin? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya, age 4. Izuku Midoriya realized how unusual he was when his whole life he had known one thing for certain. He was the fairy king, Harlequin. He had never told his mother about this, fearing what would happen if he did. That was also around the time when he found his precious chastifol in a second-hand antique shop. He had begged Inko to buy the pillow using bad excuses like, "Green is my favorite color," and "It's cooler than all my toys," neither of which Inko had believed, but she had still gotten him the pillow. After all, she still felt guilty about him being quirkless. Since then he carried the pillow around with him everywhere. Kaken, who reminded him so much of Ban, stopped being his friend after he was diagnosed as quirkless, instead bullying him about everything he could find that was wrong with the useless Deku and his life. Kaken insulted Izuku's pillow exactly once, regretted it, and never did it again. Izuku was bullied by Kaken exactly once and decided to never compare him to Ban ever again. Despite being quirkless, Izuku refused to give up on becoming a hero. Not only did he strive to become a hero because he wanted to be able to actually help people this time, but also because he wanted to dig deeper into the history of the world to find out what happened to all of his comrades. He never told anyone about his fairy abilities. Izuku Midoriya, age 10. Izuku was 10 when, at one of his yearly doctor's appointments, his doctor told him that his body stopped aging. His train of thought was something like this: whatever. I already knew this was going to happen eventually. Izuku Midoriya, age 11. When Izuku was 11, Inko walked in on him changing in his room and noticed something weird. On her son's back was a pair of fairy-like gold wings, thinner than paper. Izuku begged Inko not to tell anyone about them, but she told the staff at his school anyways, telling them to keep it a secret. Izuku decided that day to never trust another of his major secrets with Inko again. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was walking home from school and just so happened to pass through a dark, deserted tunnel. There was no one else in the tunnel and it got darker and darker as Izuku walked. In the tunnel, Izuku did not notice, but he walked past a manhole at just the wrong time. Suddenly the manhole cover behind him fell to the ground with a clang and he spun around. Standing, there was a sludge dude. "Spirit spear chastifol," Izuku said, and the pillow changed into a spear. Without hesitation the spear sped towards the sludge dude and sliced through it, knocking him out. All Might, age 48. All Might jumped out of the hole ready for a fight. He was not ready for what he saw. The sludge dude was knocked out on the ground and in front of him was a child, no older than 10, floating on a pillow. "Hello, child. Care to tell me what happened here?" he asked. "Well, Mr. All Might, there was this sludge thing that looked kind of gross, so I sliced it to pieces with my spear." The child answered with a tiredness that could rival Aizawa's. "You, a 10-year-old, sliced the sludge to pieces with a spear because he looked gross?" All Might asked, bewildered. This 10-year-old had just sliced someone to pieces because he looked gross. All Might was afraid of what this child would become, so he decided to offer the child a place in UAS hero course when he was old enough. Before he could open his mouth, though, he noticed that the child was giving him a death glare. "I'm not a child. I'm 15 already," the child yelled at him. All Might was even more bewildered than before. This child was 15 already? "All right then. Child, how would you like to go to UAS hero course?" he asked, changing the subject. The child's expression changed at this. "I've already applied for UA, but no one thinks I'll get in. 'Cause I'm quirkless," the child said. All Might's tiny brain may have malfunctioned at this point because a child who was floating in the air right in front of him had just told him that he was quirkless. "You're what? But you're floating right now." All Might tried to reason. "That's got nothing to do with a quirk. 'Cause I'm the fairy king," he slurred. Now All Might was past his brain malfunctioning, he was short-circuiting. The child had to have been lying, right? Fairies didn't even exist. At this point All Might wanted to do was deliver the sludge to the police and go home to take a nap and process all that the kid had said. So, he gave the kid an autograph and went home. Unfortunately, on his way to the police station in his skinny form, he tripped and dropped a bottle of the sludge dude. He didn't notice until he arrived at the police station with only one bottle of sludge. Then he heard an explosion. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was floating home for a nap on Chasteful, when suddenly there was an explosion. Having nothing better to do, Izuku went the way of the explosion. Once there he found things on fire everywhere, the sludge dude and a bit of familiar ash blonde hair. Though he had long stopped thinking of Kakin as his friend, he did not wish for him to die, so he floated in on his Chasteful to save him. Spirit Spear Chasteful, he commanded, and once again, the sludge guy was chopped to pieces by a floating spear. Izuku returned to floating tiredly on Chasteful, choosing to ignore Kakin and his profanity-filled equivalent to a thanks, his asking about how the useless Deku had a quirk that he had been hiding from him for years, and the pro-heroes scolding about how children shouldn't interfere in grown-up affairs, to which Kakin yelled at them about how the useless Deku was actually 15. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. It was finally the day of his entrance exam. He stood in front of the massive building that was UA high. Clutching Chasteful closer to his chest, Izuku sighed and took a few steps forward. As it turns out, not paying attention to your surroundings is a bad idea. Izuku walked right into someone. Even worse than that, said person was a hell of a lot taller than himself, so only Izuku was knocked to the ground. He braced for the impact on his, but that was sure to come. It never came. He looked up to see a brown-haired girl smiling at him. "Oh, I probably shouldn't have used my quirk on you without asking," she said, and Izuku nodded a thanks to her before asking her to put him down. "Oh, yeah, sorry, I kind of forgot." Now Izuku was quite sure that this girl was an airhead, then he noticed the slight resemblance this girl had to Diane. "By the way, I also forgot to ask, but what is a little kid like you doing here? This is a high school, you know." "Who are you calling a kid? I'm 15. Izuku yelled and then apologized for yelling at a lady when in reality he was apologizing because he had almost mixed the girl up with Diane. "Wait, so you're 15? "Yes, I am 15. Izuku replied blandly. "Anyways, thanks for helping me back there. We should probably get going." With everything said, Izuku yawned and walked towards the building, the brown-haired girl trailing behind. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku tried to stifle a yawn. Tried. He yawned anyways. He snuggled closer into Chasteful as Present Mike delivered his speech. Suddenly, one of the examinees decided to ask a question, startling Izuku out of his very comfortable sleep. Said examinee also decided to reprimand him for almost sleeping through the entire speech. Kakin snickered as he was reprimanded and was also reprimanded for snickering. "Whatever," was his reply, and the examinee seemed to get frustrated before sitting back down in his seat. Izuku took this chance to snuggle back into Chasteful and ended up sleeping through the whole explanation. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku yawned again. He was woken up from his sleep by Kakin when Present Mike's speech was done, after which he had followed the instructions on his examinee card to testing ground A. Present Mike gave the go and Izuku ran forward as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast, but he didn't give a DMN. Soon, he turned a corner and ran into a large robot that attacked him on sight, not that he wasn't expecting it. Spirit Spear Chasteful, 5th configuration, increase. He said as his pillow transformed into many small kunai that all attacked the robot at the same time. Making small gestures with his hands, Izuku destroyed the robot with much ease and proceeded to destroy the many others that had gathered around the first fight. Izuku hung around in the air lazily, making hand gestures destroying the robots. He didn't care to count his points and just destroyed the robots that attacked him. When he was finished with those, he moved around the city floating lazily on Chasteful. Suddenly, the bloody DMN huge 0-point robot came out of nowhere and started wreaking havoc on the false city. Izuku, deciding that it wasn't worth it to defeat the thing, turned to float away with the rest of the crowd when something caught his eye. He turned around to get a better look and, sure enough, There, trapped under the rubble was the brown-haired chick that had reminded him so painfully much of Diane. Izuku sighed and made some more hand motions. Spirit Spear Chastifol, 4th configuration, sunflower. As he said these words, a giant sunflower sprouted from the ground and 1-finger command later, was shooting many beams of light at the 0-point robot. The thing exploded and Izuku lazily lowered himself to the ground, Chastifol already back in its pillow form. That was boring. He complained and then fell asleep. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. It would be an understatement to say that Ochako was surprised. She had been doing quite well in the exam until the 0-point robot had come along and squished everything. That had resulted in rubble falling everywhere, which, in turn, had resulted in her being trapped under said rubble. This led to that, and she was just about to get crushed by the aforementioned robot, when the kid that she had used her quirk on at the entrance to UA came and took the thing down in one hit with a giant sunflower while floating high above the false city. Ochako reprimanded herself for thinking of him as a kid. He was the same age as her, for goodness sake. She watched in awe as the boy gently floated down to the ground and complained about how boring either the fight or the exam was. She just floated there on a piece of rubble, gaping at the boy who had apparently fallen asleep, floating on a pillow in the time it took her to process what he had said. She just continued to gape until an old lady with a syringe walking stick came and handed everyone some candy, kissing the more injured ones. Ochako happily received her bag of energy gummy bears and began chewing on them. The boy's pillow apparently took notice of everyone leaving the false city and followed the crowd, and Ochako sighed before vomiting and heaving herself off her comfortable piece of rubble. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was at home, happily leaning against Chastifol on the couch and watching TV, when suddenly, Inko came running into the living room, a piece of paper in hand. It's here. She gasped, and Izuku lazily took the letter from her. Izuku tore the letter open and pulled out the paper inside, not giving a DMN about whether or not he was accepted. Dear Izuku Midoriya, we are happy to congratulate you on your passing the entrance exam with a total of XX villain points and 20 rescue points. Please do not be late to your first day of school. Sincerely Yuhai, he read with a bored expression, and Inko squealed in delight and crushed him in a hug, congratulating him over and over. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was most certainly not nervous about meeting his new classmates as he floated ever closer to Chastifol in front of the door. He sighed in tiredness and opened the door, floating in. He was greeted with the sight of Kaken with his legs propped up on one of the desks, being berated by the blue-haired guy from the entrance ceremony. He started floating in slowly until the blue-haired guy noticed him and came up to him introducing himself. Hello, my name is Ida Tenya. I went to semi-private academy. What is your name? Midoriya Izuku, not that it really matters. I came from the same school as Kaken over there. Izuku said, gesturing lazily to Kaken. But, Fing Deku, how dare you hide your quirk from me for over 10 years? If you had one all along, why didn't you ever use it? Ha! Kaken screamed. I don't have a quirk. Izuku replied tiredly. This apparently made everyone confused. He was floating in midair, for God's sake. One such confused student by the name of Uraraka Ochako, who was eavesdropping on their entire conversation, decided to ask him about it. Plain-looking guy, what are you talking about? You're floating, so you have to have a quirk. Oh, I'm Uraraka Ochako, by the way. Izuku turned around to say something to her, but stopped when he suddenly sensed something crawling in the halls towards their homeroom. He assumed it was their homeroom teacher, but as it came into his view, he saw that it was, in fact, a very large yellow caterpillar. Spirit Spear Chastifol, 5th configuration, increase. Who are you? He asked the giant caterpillar as it flopped onto its side, revealing a very tired-looking human face. Wow. Someone noticed me before I even came into view. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. The person said, shedding his sleeping bag that was making him look like a caterpillar. A few seconds passed before everyone processed what had just been said by the weird caterpillar. Huh. Summed up all of the sound in the room afterwards, but Izuku didn't give a demon, so he couldn't be bothered to be surprised at this. He just yawned, already wanting to go home for a nap. Aizawa then reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out what looked like a gym uniform. It's really sudden, but put these on and meet me in the field. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was floating in the air, hugging Chastifol closer to him as he shivered in the short-sleeved PE clothes that Aizawa had given them. Excuse me, but shouldn't we be doing orientation or an entrance ceremony? Uraraka asked. If you're going to be heroes, you're not going to have time for that kind of stuff, was her very short reply. UA doesn't really care about how we operate our classes, just as long as we can produce quality heroes. Now, we're going to be doing a quirk assessment test. You guys have been doing these for ages, right? Physical assessments where you aren't allowed to use your quirks. Aizawa said. Well, in this one, I want you to use your quirks to help you guys get better scores for all of the events. Would you stop floating on your pillow? Aizawa said and then pointed at Izuku for the last part. But I'm tired. I don't want to stand on the ground. It just wastes energy. Izuku argued lazily. You should know that you're not allowed to use your quirk in everyday life. Now stop floating. Aizawa told Izuku, fully understanding what the boy was feeling. Izuku, too tired to argue, obeyed and stood on the ground, still carrying Chastifol. Now then, Bakugo. You scored the highest in the physical exam, right? What was your best distance for the softball throw? Aizawa continued. 67 meters. Try throwing the ball with your quirk. Kaken nodded and stepped towards the center circle of the softball throw area. As long as you stay in the circle, you can do whatever you want. Now, hurry up. As soon as this was said, Kaken smirked and started doing some basic stretches. When he was done, he picked up the softball and, with a great yell of, "Die!" he threw it with a very large explosion. A few moments later, Aizawa's machine beeped and showed a number that everyone assumed to be Kaken's distance. 705.2 meters. 705.2 meters? Everyone exclaimed. This looks like fun. A pink person who, on closer inspection, turned out to be female, said. As expected of a hero course. Said another plain-looking person. This looks like fun, Aizawa repeated. You have 3 years of hero training. Will you keep that attitude for the full 3 years? All right, the person who comes in last place in all of the tests will be expelled under the premise that they have no potential. Everyone gulped. Expulsion? On the first day? Well. Crap. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku sighed and, on instinct, floated above the school pathway on his way to the station. He was already tired, but after the quirk assessment test he was even more tired. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Most of the other students had just run normally or used their quirks in creative ways, whereas Izuku had simply used his max speed to fly to the goal. He received a score of seconds. Not terrible, but not the best either. He didn't care enough to remember his classmates' scores, so he had no idea about how he did until the results came out. For the grip strength test he tried his best, he really did, but only received a score of XX kilograms. After that was the sidestepping test, where he flew from side to side as fast as he could while managing to touch the ground at every direction change. He received a score of XX sidesteps. He vaguely remembered the purple-haired garbage can bouncing back and forth with the ball on his head, and the more he thought about it, the funnier he found it. For the long jump test, he just flew over the entire sand pit and his score was an infinity sign. For the softball throw test, he flew directly up, like a helicopter, while staying in the circle. Then he chucked it as far as his tiny arm could and received a score of XXX meters. At this point Kaken was getting to the peak of his confusion. How could someone he knew to be quirkless suddenly get a quirk and master it overnight? He exploded and charged at Izuku when he landed. What the hell? Deku busy. Explain what's going on right now. Unfortunately for Kaken, his quirk was erased and he was held back by Aizawa's capture weapons. What the f are these things? They're really hard. He yelled. They're capture weapons made of carbon fiber, woven together with metal wire made of a special alloy. Aizawa replied. Then he let Kaken go and told them to continue with the tests. The next 3 tests also went relatively well, with Izuku receiving a score of XX, XX, and seconds, respectively. In the end he got XXH place and last place went to Hagakure as she was basically just a normal human who was invisible. Aizawa then announced that the expulsion thing was a lie and Hagakure breathed a sigh of relief. Izuku, at the start of the test, didn't care about the expulsion, so he wasn't one of the people who gulped, nor was he one of the people who knew it was a lie. He was his own category called didn't give a f dash. In the end, Izuku, who was happy with his results, fell asleep on Chastafol again and had to be woken up by Kaken several times during the rest of the school day. Tenya Ida, age 15. Tenya gulped in nervousness, looking at the green fuzzball in front of him. Hesitantly he reached out to tap his shoulder. Then he retracted his hand, faster than the speed of light. He silently cleared his throat, slapped his cheeks and pushed his glasses up his nose, as they were slipping down his face. He reached his hand out again, this time with much more confidence, and placed it on the boy's shoulder. Midoriya stirred a bit before waking up. Ida, what do you want? I would like to ask you about how you knew that there was something else to the entrance exam and how you knew that Mr. Aizawa was lying. Here's the secret. I didn't know. I saved Uraraka because she reminded me of someone I used to know. As for the quirk assessment test, I didn't know either. I simply didn't give a DM cause I knew I wouldn't come last. Izuku explained, and suddenly Tenya knew a lot more about Midoriya's personality. He was a lazy person who was overconfident for a good reason and who simply didn't give a rat's butt or two about most important things. Tenya continued to walk beside Midoriya as he slept and, without realizing it, he started rambling about things on his mind while Midoriya slept beside him and his pillow towed him forward, presumably to get him home so that he could sleep on a proper bed. Tenya would not understand Midoriya for a very long time. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako was planning on walking to the station so she could take a train home and write her XXX lemon fanfic when she spotted a familiar green bean sprout, sleep floating, as she had dubbed it, next to Ida, the scary blue-haired person. Hey, you too! She called out to the two boys. Ida turned his head immediately, but Midoriya just continued sleep floating home. Going to the station? Wait for me, please. She yelled as she ran towards them. This yell woke Midoriya, who turned towards where the yelling had come from. Oh, hey Uraraka. Midoriya greeted. Oh, you're the Infinity Girl. Ida rudely addressed her. I'm Uraraka Ochako. You're Ida Tenya, right? And you're Midoriya Izuku? I'm Uraraka Ochako. Nice to meet you. Can I walk to the station with you too? She asked. Midoriya nodded and the three started walking again. Hey Midoriya, why did that boy, Bakugo, call you Deku? Is it like a nickname? Tako asked, curious. Yeah. When we were younger, Kaken noticed that my name can also be read as useless or Deku, so he started calling me Deku as an insult. But I really don't care what you guys call me. He replied lazily. Well, I think that Deku kinda sounds like, you can do it, so I'm gonna call you Deku. Ochako said, pumping her fists. Midoriya went back to sleep for the rest of the way to the station and Ochako found herself wondering if Midoriya dreamed, and what he dreamed about. She could hear faint mumbling in his sleep, things like names, but she didn't understand where he got all of it from. Was it part of his past or just the random ramblings of dreams? Ochako decided that she would probably never understand Midoriya Izuku. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. When Izuku got home he thought for a moment before opening the door and stating his return. He made some new friends. He wondered if any of his old friends were still alive. Ban was probably still alive. He had no idea about any of the others though. He just hoped that Diane was alive, though he wouldn't mind any of the others being alive. Then another thought occurred to him. Had any of the others been reincarnated? If so, would they still remember their past lives? Izuku gave up thinking about answers he would probably never get and went to sleep in his very warm and very comfortable bed, awaiting the next time he would wake and hoping that the next day he would be less tired and the burden he felt on his shoulders would weigh less. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku got to school early so that he could sleep some more. He had had no luck in his hopes from the previous night as he was tormented by nightmares of how his comrades may have died, and the weight of keeping his secret weighed him down even more than the day before, and so he was dead tired for yet another day of school. He wanted to sleep in but not be late for school, so he had come up with the marvelous plan of going to school at 5 a.m. and just sleep until he was woken by Kaken's yelling. It kinda worked. He ended up sleep floating on Chastafol again and was lying on the ceiling when he woke up. Of course, UA had huge classrooms for some of the larger mutant-type quirks, so he was completely out of everyone's sight when they entered the room. When Kaken walked in, he started having an argument with Ida about rude nicknames, e.g. Sonic the Hedgehog, Round Face and Octopus Arms for Ida, Uraraka and Shoji respectively, which had startled Izuku out of his sleep. It was a rather embarrassing moment for the entire class. Izuku, after having just woken up from a dream about the captain, had, whilst falling onto his desk, yelled, "Captain!" The rest of the class hadn't thought that Izuku would already be at school, so they had varied reactions. From yelling about the 9 circles of the 8 hells, to screaming a couple octaves higher than should be possible, the class reacted in good and bad ways. Kaken, for example, had screamed at Izuku, "What in the good name of the 9 circles of the hell were you doing floating up there?" Uraraka had passed out the second he screamed about the captain and fallen from the ceiling, and Ida took her to the sick bay after he finished screaming the highest note a human is capable of. Izuku was extremely embarrassed about his scream, which people had questioned, and he had replied that it was none of their business. It really wasn't any of their business. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. After sleeping through most of the regular classes in the morning and eating lunch, Izuku was sitting in his classroom waiting for All Might to arrive and teach his class. "I am coming through the door like a normal person," All Might yelled as he came through the door in a very unusual way, wearing his Silver Age costume. The class watched in amazement as he marched over to the teacher's podium to introduce his class. The introduction was pretty simple. Basically, he taught hero basic training where the students would learn how to become a hero. Izuku thought it was rather stupid. Heroics aren't something you can learn. Heroism is something your personality adopts and develops over time. Not that he cared. He just wanted to achieve his goal of finding his comrades. After this thought, he got so wrapped up in his thoughts that he completely missed what All Might had said. The next thing he knew, the class costumes were coming out of the wall and everyone was taking theirs to get changed and go to ground beta. Izuku collected his costume and went to the change room. Izuku's costume was quite simple. It was his old outfit from when he was king, but with some modifications. The lazy author will add things to his costume when they're needed. Just imagine whatever hybrid of Izuku's original costume and king's clothes you already have pictured in your mind. If you have none, it's not that important, just make one or ignore this, I don't care. It's your experience. Smiley face. Izuku waited until the change room was empty before going in to change, so as to hid his wings from the others. Little did he know that there was one person who thought it was suspicious for him to wait until everyone else was done before changing. This someone was hiding in one of the lockers, having slipped in while no one was looking. He watched in amazement as Izuku took off his uniform and revealed his golden wings. Katsuki Bakugo, age 15. Katsuki watched in amazement, through the locker holes, as Izuku took off his uniform, revealing a paper-thin pair of golden wings. He had always wondered why Izuku had stopped changing for P when he knew why. The wings must have started growing when he was 11, which would also explain why the teachers just allowed him to not change. He was still confused as to why he had kept it all secret from everyone though. Surely his wings were just part of a quirk, right? It was at this point in his life that Bakugo Katsuki decided to stop bullying Midoriya Izuku and start trying to understand the enigma that was he. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako was worried for Midoriya. He and the Bakugo guy hadn't come out of the change room yet, and she was worried that Bakugo may have done something. With Midoriya's weakness, he wouldn't be able to defend himself from a strong and sturdy guy like Bakugo. She thought, completely forgetting the power he demonstrated at the entrance exam. When footsteps from the hallway reached her ears, Ochako almost sighed in relief. Footsteps were good, right? They meant that someone alive and well was coming from the hallway, right? And that meant that Midoriya was fine. Ochako turned around so fast she thought she would wind up facing where she started, just so she could get a better view of the person, presumably Midoriya, who was in the hallway. Her face soured when she saw that the footsteps were from one Bakugo Katsuki. Again, she seemed to have forgotten that Izuku preferred floating over walking, and that was exactly what he was doing. Midoriya came floating down the hallway right behind Bakugo, completely unharmed and looking rather energized for once. He looked like a weight that had been on his shoulders for over 100 years, had finally been lifted. Ochako was happy that Midoriya finally looked happier than when she had first met him. After all, she had a strong urge to protect him, whether from emotions or physical pain. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku had no idea what was going to happen when he floated out of the hallway. He didn't expect anything huge to happen, just All Might talking about how the exercise would go. He, unfortunately, was not expecting one Uraraka Ochako to bound up to him and almost tackle him into a hug. Maidoraiya. I'm so glad you're okay. She had yelled the second he had come out of the hallway. She ran up to him and tried to crush him in a hug only for him to dodge and her to fall flat on her face. Are you all right, Uraraka? Izuku asked, holding out a hand for her to take. She took it gladly and he helped her up as she blushed, probably remembering her behavior towards someone she just met. I'm sorry. I just thought that, since you and Bakugo were the only ones left in the change room, maybe he had done something to hurt you, which was why you two were the only ones left in the change room because he tried to hurt you, and I was just worried for you because of how small you are. I'm sorry, she exclaimed in one breath. Izuku was kind of offended at being called small and he voiced his thoughts on the matter. Hey, I'm not small, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I'll have you know that I'm both stronger and old. Izuku cut himself off. He had almost outed his secret to Uraraka. He mentally sighed. Hiding his reincarnation was hard. Really hard. But on the bright side, at least Kaken would stop attacking him for no apparent reason. Yes, Kaken would be confused for at least a week before either coming to him for more answers or ignoring him completely. Flashback, brought to you by Izuku, who understands the audience's pain in not knowing what happened in the change room. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku changed, knowing full well that Kaken was watching him change. He had decided that Kaken deserved an explanation to his sudden quirk. As he put on his costume, he called out to Kaken. Hey Kaken. I know you're in that locker. Come out. Izuku smiled as he heard Kaken curse under his breath about being found out. Yo dork. How'd you know I was in there? And what's with the wings? Why didn't you tell me you had a quirk sooner? Kaken said, increasing his volume until he yelled the last question. I'll answer all of those questions. First, I can feel people's auras around me. Yours was laughably loud, like you didn't even try to hide. Though, I suppose you don't yet know how to conceal your aura, much like most other people nowadays. Second, I'm the fairy king, so of course I have wings. All fairies have wings. Third, I don't have a quirk. All my power is from being the fairy king. My original name is Harlequin, but I stopped using that name in my past life and changed it to King after the Fairy King's forest burned down. After that, I joined a knight order with 7 members called the 7 Deadly Sins, and together we went on many adventures and subjugations before we were framed for the crime of killing the Grand Holy Knight of the kingdom we worked for. Then we were scattered around the world for 10 years before being reunited by a princess looking to overthrow the new Grand Holy Knights, which led to us finding many the scattered sins and attacking the kingdom's holy knights after finding out they were dabbling in demonic magic and trying to release the demons that were sealed away a long time ago. We failed in stopping them, so we just killed the demons they let out before sealing the rest back into their world. Izuku explained to Kaken. There's no way that's real. It's just too strange. Too fantasy. I refuse to believe that shitty story you made up to try and fool me. Besides, if this were really true, that would make you really old, and I've known you my whole life, but I never saw any signs that you were that old. Kaken yelled. Then he mumbled a little bit, but Izuku heard it loud and clear. Or maybe I did, I just chose to ignore them. I think I'm over 1,300 years old. Don't remember the exact number of years. Lost track. Izuku replied to a thoroughly confused Kaken. Izuku, after heaving the entire story of his past life onto someone else, felt refreshed for once in his new life, and he was no longer tired. He instantly looked energized. "You can process it all later, we have class now. Let's go," he said excitedly, floating out of the room and into the hallway. Somewhere along the way, Kaken put up a tough facade and began walking in front of Izuku. Izuku had no idea what that meant. Flashback end, brought to you by the lazy and annoying author you probably hate moi. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku floated there listening to All Might talk about the exercise. Apparently, they would be split into teams of 2, then said teams would be given the role of either hero or villain, and each hero team would be paired with a villain team, and they would have a STMLTN of a situation a hero might find themselves in. The situation was that the villains had somehow gotten their hands on a bomb, which they hid in their hideout. The heroes had to retrieve the bomb or catch the villains with capture tape. There was a 15-minute time limit, and the heroes would lose if they failed to retrieve the bomb before the timer ran out or if they were caught by the villains. Finally, the teams and their roles would be decided by drawing lots. Team A, Ashido and Tokoyami. Team B, Kirishima and Midoriya. Team C, Ida and Uraraka. Team D, Hagakure and Mineta. Team E, Koda and Shoji. Team F, Ojiro and Aju. Team G, Aoyama and Kaminari. Team H, Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. Team I, Sato and Shiro. Team J, Jiro and Bakugo. That's all the teams. Now, to decide the matches we will be drawing lots again. All Might said after everyone had drawn their lots. The first match will be. All Might yelled while taking 2 balls with letter out of 2 containers. These guys. Team D and Team H. All Might yelled. Everyone knew who was going to win the match. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku watched, totally and completely bored, as Todoroki almost gave Hagakure frostbite on her feet and made Mineta PSS in his diaper-like hero costume and faint. He had seen far more interesting battles than anything any of these humans had ever seen before. In fact, Izuku knew for a fact that any one of the sins, paired up with the 2 weaklings that had just fought Todoroki, would have put on a better show than Todoroki had just done, but he supposed that Todoroki was efficient in his fighting style and that he just wanted to get the silly mock battle over with. As Izuku was lost in his thoughts, he completely missed the announcing of the next mock battle pairing. He didn't care. None of the fights would be worth watching anyways. So, he continued thinking about how he might find out the rest of the Sin's fates. Maybe he could go to the library and read some history books? While he thought, a brown-haired girl was watching him, observing his face. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako watched one Midoriya Izuku as he thought about who knew what. She sighed. What could he possibly be thinking about that got him into such a state? He looked serious, like he was trying to find something with only his mind by thinking about it as much as possible. Ochako tried to stop thinking about Midoriya. Tried. She just couldn't get her thoughts away from the little broccoli. He was just so cute and so unprotected. Ochako felt her face heat up in embarrassment at her thoughts. When had she become so daring in her thoughts? Even though he had proven himself more than capable of protecting himself, Ochako still couldn't help but want to protect him. She supposed that it was a quality of the boy and that everyone felt the desperate need to protect him. Either way, he was just too cute. Ochako blushed even more at the thought and shook her head, silently reprimanding herself for thinking something like that. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was thinking about history when he was shaken out of his thoughts by someone calling his name. Midoriya. Bro. It's our turn to fight. Stop daydreaming. Ah, it was Kirishima calling his name. Izuku blinked, not exactly ready for the real world yet. Had their team been called out? It must have been if Kirishima was calling him. Izuku responded with an, "Alright, I'm coming," and he followed Kirishima to their battleground. Izuku was not paying attention at all, and so he had no idea who they were fighting. According to Kirishima though, their opponents were Ojiro and Azui. This would be an easy win for Izuku, so he floated leisurely into the building behind Kirishima when the timer started. As they floated, through the doorway, Izuku transformed Chastifol into its second form, Guardian. He didn't want to use its spear form because he was worried that the spear would seriously injure his opponents, and while he didn't really care whether or not they were okay, it would cause a lot of trouble for him and he would really prefer to avoid as much trouble as possible. While Izuku had long since forgotten about his teammate, Kirishima was lost in thought about his teammate. Eijiro Kirishima, age 15. Eijiro had never seen anyone as careless or lazy as Midoriya before in his entire life. Eijiro wondered how in the world someone as lazy as Midoriya could get into UA Academy, the most prestigious high school in Mizudafu. The guy was just so laid back that, if Eijiro didn't know better, he would have thought it was his quirk. Then a thought hit Eijiro like lightning hits a lightning rod. What if his laid-back personality came from his quirk? That would explain everything. Due to being so lost in thoughts about Midoriya and his quirk, Eijiro totally and completely failed to notice that they had already gone up a few staircases and that Midoriya had suddenly stopped floating forward, instead hovering in midair. So, Eijiro, like the careless fool he can be, walked right into Midoriya. Eijiro did not at all expect to walk right into Midoriya and he immediately apologized. Or tried to, as he was instantly shushed by Midoriya's finger going up to his lips. What Midoriya whispered next would change Eijiro's image of him forever. "Be quiet, Ojiro's on this floor. Right in front of the stairs, I'll bet that the next floor is the one with the bomb. Here's my plan. We'll hide behind a pillar or a wall, then I'll go knock him out as quickly as possible with my Chastifol. If that fails, I'll use Chastifal's guardian form to restrain his limbs and you knock him out with your hardening quirk. Is that okay?" Eijiro thought the plan over. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it would be good enough for this exercise, so he put his hand up in an OK symbol and they headed out. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku knew his plan would work. He had only talked about failing for Kirishima and All Might to hear. Izuku knew for a fact that he was way stronger than Ojiro, and even if he couldn't sneak up on Ojiro, he always had Chastifol with him, so he concluded that his plan was flawless. Before initiating his plan, Izuku scouted out the floor with Chastifal's fifth form, Increase. After making a rough mental map of the floor's layout, he signaled for Kirishima to follow him until they reached the wall he was going to hide behind, where he signaled for Kirishima to stop and wait. Then, quietly, he snuck up on Ojiro and, using Chastifal's second form, Guardian, clocked him over the head, knocking him out. When he was done wrapping Ojiro in the capture tape they were given at the start of the match, he signaled for Kirishima to come out from behind the wall they had been hidden behind before Izuku went to knock Ojiro out. Now that Ojiro was out, Izuku and Kirishima went up the stairs he was guarding cautiously. Izuku knew that, if it came to a confrontation he would surely win against Azui, but they still acted cautiously, as they had no idea what Azui's true capabilities were if she had any. Izuku doubted that Azui had been hiding her abilities at all. She did, after all, have an extremely honest and straightforward aura, and she herself had said that she was a person who spoke her mind. As they made their way up the stairs, Izuku formulated another plan in his head while sensing auras. Azui was right in front of the bomb, and the stairs would lead right to the entrance of the room she was in. She was facing the doorway as well, so it would be hard to sneak in without her noticing. So that left just one idea in his mind. Izuku opened his mouth to tell Kirishima his plan according to what his aura sensing had told him, but he was stopped by Kirishima telling him his own plan first. "Okay bro. Here's my plan. So Azui is definitely going to be guarding the bomb and she'll probably be facing the door, so I'm gonna charge in and distract her while you fly to the bomb and capture it. Okay?" Izuku nodded because he wanted Kirishima to have a time to shine as well, and honestly, Kirishima's plan wasn't too far off from his own plan. So, they went up the rest of the stairs, Kirishima in the front and Izuku lazily floating in the back with Chastifol above him. When they, mostly Kirishima, reached the top of the stairs, Azui was, indeed, crouching in front of the bomb, looking at the door. As soon as Kirishima reached the doorway, Azui noticed him and launched herself from her crouching position, jumping like a frog, towards Kirishima. Azui knocked Kirishima back into the stairway he had come from while Izuku floated close to the ceiling above the two fighters. Silently, without touching the ground, Izuku floated over to the bomb and reached out a hand to touch the bomb. Just as his hand was about to reach the bomb, he felt something long and wet wrap around his arm and pull it back. It turned out that it was Ajui's tongue. Grossed out, Izuku moved his other hand to touch the bomb while signaling for Chastifal's guardian form to attack Ajui. It was extremely effective. Chastifal knocked Ajui over the head and her tongue slipped off of Izuku's arm while his other hand touched the bomb. With that, Team B, Kirishima and Midoriya, won. Izuku Midoriya? Age? It was dark. So very dark. Izuku could hear the voices of his friends. The captain. Diane. Elizabeth. Even Ban. Since he had been reborn, Izuku had been wondering what had happened to his friends. Even if he didn't like admitting it, they were precious to him as comrades, friends. As family. He yearned for them and he could only imagine what could have possibly happened to them. Izuku could hear his past comrades calling out to him. But their voices were distorted. It was wrong. This was wrong. So wrong. Then the images appeared. They were of his friends but at the same time, not his friends. They looked at him in disappointment, blood trickling down their faces. How could you? They all said, their voices a distorted mess. Then once again, but clearer, a lot clearer, so real that King's heart ached. How could you leave us and die all alone? You are so selfish. Then the images were gone, leaving only warm blood. The next moment was his sole moment of peace. King knew this very well. He had after all had this dream since he was first reborn. In this moment of peace, he would reflect upon the things he'd done as Harlequin, and the things he'd done as King, and finally, the things he'd done as Izuku. All three people were one and the same yet at the same time, totally different. Harlequin was the fairy king, King a holy knight turned criminal and Izuku a quirkless boy who wished to be a hero. They were all so different yet they shared the same soul. The soul of a hero. They shared the same memories, the same feelings towards comrades, past and present. King reflected there, laying in the puddle of blood for a while, before he did something he had never done here before. He stood up and gave a deep bow, apologizing to his comrades. His friends. His family. He apologized for leaving them. For dying all alone, somewhere where they wouldn't find him. Then the images came again. But this time, they didn't bring pain to King nor did they blame him for leaving them. They smiled at him. They waved. Finally, they disappeared. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku gasped. He'd had that horrible nightmare again. Ever since he was reborn, he'd been haunted in sleep by gruesome images of his friends and, in wake, by worry for his friends. Izuku rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and looked around at the worried faces of his classmates. That was when he realized the huge mistake he'd made. He'd had the nightmare in front of his class and he was probably sleep-talking. Now, they would probably think of him differently. Well, sheet. Tenya Ida, age 15. Tenya stared, worried, at his small green-haired classmate. The boy had fallen asleep and Tenya thought nothing of it at all as it was a common occurrence. But, then he'd heard something coming out of Midoriya's mouth. To be more precise, Tenya heard Midoriya silently sobbing. Instantly alert to his new friend's status, Tenya ignored the fight that was going on and walked swiftly towards Midoriya, who was sleep-floating once again. That was when he saw the tears rolling down Midoriya's face. Midoriya was crying. Tenya thought about telling All Might, but he decided against it because he knew that Midoriya would probably be embarrassed that he was crying in his sleep. So, Tenya just sat there, on the bench, beside Midoriya's floating pillow. Unfortunately, a certain someone noticed Tenya sitting beside the floating broccoli. Said person was, once again, one Uraraka Ochako and she immediately began loudly asking questions. Why is Midoriya crying? Did you do something, Ida? Hey, Mr. All Might, Midoriya's crying. Tenya knew that Uraraka was only worried for their friend, but this was overdoing it. Hey, Uraraka, please quiet down. Don't you think that Midoriya wouldn't want everyone to know that he was crying? Come here and sit down, we can try to comfort him by being here. Unfortunately, once again it was already too late. The whole class, minus those on the battlefield, came over to see what the commotion was. Then, Midoriya started apologizing. He apologized profusely to people no one in the class knew. Names like Ban and Diane came out of his mouth as he apologized. After the intense apologies, Midoriya smiled slightly. Whatever he was dreaming about seemed to be changing, becoming better than what Tenya could only assume was a nightmare. Then, Midoriya's green eyes opened. He looked around at the worried faces surrounding him. Rubbing the sleep and tears from his eyes, he blinked a few times. "What are you all doing?" he asked, his voice firm, unlike the shaky voice he had used when he was apologizing in his sleep. "Who in the world were you talking about? You were apologizing to people in your sleep, by the way. Someone called Ban and someone called Diane? Weird names," Kaminari said. He seemed to not really understand the situation. Midoriya looked away from his classmates. "Ban is someone I used to know. I'm not sure whether or not he's still alive. Diane was the girl I loved. She's probably also dead now though. But that's why I want to be a hero. So I can dig through records and see if I can find them," Midoriya revealed. Tenya didn't know what to say. He was shocked, for one, that his small friend had been hiding such a dark secret from them. He could only imagine what Midoriya had been through. No doubt, he was kidnapped with some of his friends and his crush, and then he alone escaped while the rest perished, or something equally sad. With newfound pity for the boy, Tenya decided that he would strive to become a better person if not for his own sake, then for Midoriya's. All Might, age 48. All Might couldn't help but wonder. He'd never heard the name Diane before, but he had heard the name Ban. Young Midoriya was the child he had run into while chasing the sludge villain, and so he had a deeply set memory of meeting him. Now, All Might remembered. When he had first met young Midoriya, the child had told him that he was the Fairy King. He'd scoffed it off as just a joke on the child's side, but now, mentioning the name Ban, All Might remembered an old story, passed down from his grandmother to him when he was young, of a Fairy King. The Fairy King, Harlequin was his name, could fly and do all sorts of things with his spear, Chastiful. He was originally the guardian of the Fairy King's forest, however he left the forest for unknown reasons, only for the forest to get burned down by a demon in his absence. Later, Harlequin joined an order of holy knights known as the strongest in their kingdom, the 7 Deadly Sins. That was where he changed his name to King. King, Meliodas, the name of the captain, and one other were the only names All Might's grandmother knew. However, the final name was Ban. If young Midoriya was apologizing to Ban, it would make sense if he was the Fairy King. Young Midoriya also fit the description of the story except for one thing, the Fairy King's appearance. Harlequin was said to have had brown-pink hair and amber eyes, but young Midoriya had dark green hair and emerald eyes. Very different from the story. All Might continued to think about the name Ban for a few minutes. He knew he'd heard the name somewhere other than his grandmother's stories before. But where? Suddenly it clicked. Where he had heard the name Ban. Ban also happened to be the name of a suspect of mass murder. He'd been held in a cell, deep underground, for hundreds of years until recently. He'd somehow escaped by disguising himself as a guard he'd knocked out, and he was now on the loose. No one knew where he was or if he was dangerous because no one actually remembered his case details enough to be able to pin his crime. Either way, that Ban probably wasn't the one young Midoriya was looking for. A part of All Might screamed that he shouldn't tell young Midoriya about the potential mass murderer wearing his friend's name that was on the loose. But another part of All Might wanted to help young Midoriya find his friend, even if it meant putting him in danger. In the end, All Might resolved that he would tell young Midoriya about the area that Ban the potential mass murderer was probably lurking around, then he would follow young Midoriya in case he found Ban, and protect him if he did. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku had no idea why All Might had asked him to wait for him after school, but he hoped it wasn't anything troublesome, because he had stuff he wanted to do after school. So, he waited in front of the school for All Might to come out and say whatever it was he needed to say and then go home. Izuku thought about things for a while as he was waiting for All Might. In fact, he got so lost in thought that he didn't even notice the very, very large man come up behind him. Young Midoriya. Sorry for keeping you waiting, I had some business to take care of. All Might said, scaring Izuku out of his thoughts. What the hell? When did you get here? Izuku shouted. What do you mean? I got here just now, young Midoriya. I'm sorry if I surprised you. Anyways, today while you were sleeping, you began crying and muttering names. One of the names I have actually heard before. All Might said, immediately getting Izuku's full attention. Which one? Izuku exclaimed. Tell me. I must know. Ban. Ban is the name of a murder suspect who recently got away. He's been locked up in an underground cell for hundreds of years and no one remembers the details of his case, so no one can convict him of the crime he supposedly committed. All Might said. I happen to know what part of the city he most likely escaped to, and I'm gonna tell you. Izuku nodded, telling All Might to continue, and so All Might told Izuku where Ban was most likely wandering. All Might, age 48. All Might watched from a distance as young Midoriya looked around, searching for Ban. He had told young Midoriya about this district where Ban was most likely hiding, but he didn't think that the boy would actually go there to search for the man. Now, he was stuck following him in case he got into any serious danger. Young Midoriya looked around the district, when he suddenly saw a very dark and dangerous-looking alley. The child looked at the alley for a while before promptly walking into it. All Might sighed and face-palmed. It was like young Midoriya was asking for death, walking into an alley, all alone in a dangerous and unfamiliar district. All Might followed him into the alley, hiding behind various objects so he wouldn't be noticed. For safety, he was also in his skinny form. Young Midoriya looked around the alley as he walked through it, making a left turn, out of the original alley and into another. All Might continued to follow young Midoriya through twists and turns in the alleys until they came to a dead end with a single homeless person in it. The person had turquoise-white hair. He was not wearing a shirt. His face was shadowed as he was looking down, and so All Might couldn't tell if this was the potential murderer Ban or just some random homeless person. Young Midoriya, however, seemed to think this was who he was looking for, as he walked toward the guy and said a small hello. The man looked up, revealing his bearded face, and to All Might's dismay, was in fact the escaped Ban. Who the hell are you? Ban asked young Midoriya as he approached in his UA uniform, green pillow in hand. Young Midoriya laughed, giving All Might a fright. It's been a while, Ban. That's the second time you've said something like that to me. Have you forgotten me again? Though I suppose it has been a very long time and my appearance has changed. I'm gonna ask again, who the hell are you? How do you know my name? Ban asked, getting up. You don't remember? The last time you asked who I was in the village near the entrance to the city of the dead. Remember now? Ban age? Ban was getting more and more frustrated by the green-haired kid standing in front of him. The kid knew his name and claimed to know him, but he'd never met anyone who looked like the green-haired kid. He'd, of course, failed to notice the green pillow in the kid's hands, but he was too agitated for that. Seriously, who was the kid? He really didn't know him, and yet the kid kept talking to him. Then, the kid said something that triggered his memory. You don't remember? The last time you asked who I was in the village near the entrance to the city of the dead. Remember now? King was the only one who matched that description. But this kid wasn't King. How could he know something that only King should know? Unless... What did you do to him? He asked bluntly. What did I do to who? The kid asked, with a tilt of his head, genuinely confused. You know, King, what did you do to him? Oh, I did absolutely nothing to him. Then how do you know things that only he should know? Because I am King. The kid shouted, aggravated. No, you aren't. You don't look like King at all, and you don't have Chastiful either. Yeah, actually, I do have Chastiful. Where? Right here. The kid exclaimed, shoving a familiar green pillow at Ban. So you have Chastiful. That doesn't automatically make you King. Tell me something that only King would know. When we were traveling with Elizabeth, Diane, and the captain, I asked you guys where your sacred treasures were. The captain said that he sold his, Diane said she dropped hers, and you said you let yours get stolen. Then Elizabeth asked about sacred treasures, so I explained it to her with a nearby lake. Ban stared at the kid in bewilderment. The green-haired kid did tell him something that only someone from that time would know, as it had already been many years and everyone who knew details like that were likely dead. Okay. Say I believe you when you say you're king. What do we do now? Well, isn't that obvious? We study to become heroes. So that we can help people again. And why would I want to do that? Ban asked. Truthfully, he was quite curious about what it meant to be a hero. Well, it would let you use your magical abilities in public. It also gives you the chance to fight people, which I know you enjoy, no matter how much you try to deny it. Fine. So, how are we supposed to do this? I don't know. Then why did you suggest it? I don't know, but I bet that guy behind the garbage can does. King replied, jabbing a thumb at a nearby trash can. Toshinori Yagi, age 48. Crap. He'd been found out by young Midoriya. Sighing, he got out from behind the garbage can and walked over to the two young-looking guys. Toshinori knew better than that, however, as Ban had been alive for millennia, and if young Midoriya, King, knew him, that would make him also very old. I'm sorry for following you, young Midoriya. I was simply worried that this man was dangerous because he's a suspect in a mass murder crime that happened hundreds of years ago. Wow. It's a skeleton thing, Ban said as he examined All Might in his skinny form. King said you knew how to become a hero. Tell me. Unfortunately you have to have a hero license to become a hero, otherwise you will be charged with vigilantism and that's a crime. It's also rather unfortunate that in modern society, only people who have completed the full 3 years of the hero course can qualify to test for the license, and the hero course is only offered in high school for some reason, and you are already considered far too old to go to high school even if you weren't a wanted man. Toshinori explained to Ban. So what should I do now? I guess you could live with me in my mother's apartment. Young Midoriya said. Wait. You have a mother? I didn't know fairies could reproduce. I thought you all came from that sacred tree thing. Ban. I got reincarnated as Izuku Midoriya. My mother is completely human. Ban hummed. That explains the green hair and eyes. Anyways, let's go meet your mother, King. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku floated on his pillow with Ban walking behind him. They had told All Might that he could go home, and after All Might left, Izuku took the lead, bringing Ban back to his home to meet his mother, Inko. So King, you still got that formal form of yours? Ban asked, breaking the tense, but not awkward, silence. You mean this one? Izuku replied, changing into his human form, a middle-aged man, with a grunt. Ban burst out laughing, and Izuku huffed in annoyance, quickly changing back into his normal form and letting out a breath. So you still have that even after being reincarnated. It looks even funnier with your messy green hair that shoots out everywhere. Ban laughed. Whatever. Izuku yelled at Ban, floating faster. After the short but funny conversation, the rest of the trip was in total and complete silence. Comfortable but not as comfortable as possible. When they got to the apartment, Izuku took out his keys and unlocked the door. I'm home. I brought a friend too. Izuku yelled into the home. Oh my Izuku brought home a friend? I'm so proud of you. You're making friends already. Inko said as she hugged Izuku, tears threatening to come out. I've been friends with him for quite some time now. I just never told you, and then he moved away. Yeah. He moved to another city with his parents. But now he's old enough to live alone. I ran into him on the way home. Is it okay if he stays with us? Izuku asked, Inko no longer hugging her son, but looking at the strange man he'd brought home. Inko Midoriya, age 31. Inko studied the strange, shirtless man her son had brought home. In her honest opinion, he looked like some random homeless delinquent guy her son found on the street, but Izuku had told her that they'd been friends for quite some time, and Inko didn't believe her son was a liar. So she decided not to judge the man and just welcome him into her home with open arms. The man was tall, very tall, and though his beard suggested otherwise, he looked to be in his early 20s and he had very well-toned body. So muscular in fact, that Inko would have averted her eyes if she weren't judging and taking in his full appearance. He also had a strange tattoo of a fox on the left side of his abdomen, near his waist. The style was almost the same as the strange birthmark of a bear her son had on his left calf, which he refused to show anyone. Though his upper body was well-toned and the muscles were very visible, his face was not as visible, and so Inko could not judge whether or not he was good-looking. Inko mentally slapped herself. Why would she think anything like that? This man was her son's friend, for goodness sake. What's your name, young man? And why do you look so ragged? You should go take a shower and get that beard shaved. Then we can talk about clothes. Izuku's friend seemed thrown off by what she'd said, surprised by the kindness she was showing. That was rather strange. It was almost as if the man hadn't been shown genuine kindness in a while. I'm Ban. I couldn't find a job after my parents kicked me out, so I hitchhiked here to see if I could find a job here. I couldn't. So I lived outside like a homeless person, and then, while I was sleeping, all my stuff got stolen by some a-hole. Then Kisuke here found me sleeping in an alley and brought me to your home. The now-named young man explained. Inko noted that the man had not said anything about a last name, but her sympathy for the young man overwhelmed her curiosity and she burst out in tears. That's terrible. I can't believe your parents would do something like that to you. How awful. You can stay here as long as you want, dear. Inko sobbed, genuinely touched by Ban's story. Thank you. Ban replied, smiling at Izuku. Ban age? Ban was not at all expecting King's new mother to burst into tears after hearing some lies he came up with on the spot. He was also not expecting for her to offer to let him stay as long as he wanted, but at least he'd secured a place to stay for now, and he considered that a victory. Next, he just had to find out how to annoy King as much as possible. Speaking of King, he'd been uncharacteristically quiet for a while now, so Ban turned and smiled at him, indicating that he thought of this as a victory. King, however, seemed totally unaffected. Then, Ban saw tears prickling at the edge of King's eyes, and it clicked in Ban's mind. Ban had stayed alive for quite a while, and he knew everything that was going on in the world, including the fact that regular civilian humans were developing magical abilities, which they now called quirks. But King hadn't had the luxury of living through the discovery of magical abilities in regular civilians, so he must have been scared and confused when he was suddenly thrown into a world filled with magical abilities and no signs of the people he called his friends. Suddenly, Ban didn't feel like trying to annoy King anymore. So, he asked Inko to show him to the bathroom so he could shave the very long beard he had grown in the centuries that he had been locked up. Inko gladly brought him to the bathroom, and after Ban left to follow Inko to the bathroom, he saw from the corner of his eye King leaving his shoes at the doorway and slowly floating into a room that Ban assumed was his. In the bathroom, Ban found a bunch of assorted cosmetics, a pair of toothbrushes and a razor, which he promptly used to shave off his beard. This time, he decided to try out a new hairstyle, different from the one he had when the 7 deadly sins fought the 10 commandments, but also different from what he'd had 10 years before that. The lazy author hates hair, so she won't tell you a specific hairstyle. Just choose a hairstyle you always wanted to see Ban have. But don't give him a beard because that will get in the way very soon. Winky face. When he was finished cutting his overgrown hair, he turned on the bathtub tap and ran the water for a while, waiting for it to warm, before getting in and taking a shower. It was bliss to finally be able to take a shower after centuries of living in an underground cell that didn't have a shower and then living on the streets for a few months. He was also starving, but the shower was better, so he focused on that and the good parts of being alive rather than his complaining stomach. After the admittedly rather long shower, Ban wrapped a towel firmly around his waist, picked up his tattered pants and walked out of the bathroom, to see King sitting on the couch in the middle of the living room and his mother, in the kitchen, presumably cooking. As Ben walked into the room, King, who was watching a show about some kid with a fire quirk cooking, turned to look at him. I see you've cleaned yourself up. Did you enjoy the shower? It was rather long. Like my new haircut? Ban asked King, smirking. It's better than what you had before. Tell me honestly, how many years ago did you last cut your hair? King replied with a sour expression. Ban hummed. About 100 years? I don't know. Ban shrugged. Inko chuckled at the statement that was, in fact, 100% serious. You have quite the sense of humor there, Ban. By the way, are you hungry? I'm making dinner and if you want, you can join us. If you just want to go to sleep, then Izuku can set up a futon in his room for you. I'm sorry we don't have any clothes in your size, so you'll have to make do with anything Izuku hands you, okay? Then we can go buy you some clothes tomorrow. Seeing as you don't have a job, it should be fine to go out tomorrow, right? I'll call a sick day. Ban smiled, mentally rejoicing. There was food for him. I am very hungry, thanks. If you ever need any help in the kitchen, feel free to ask me. Ban replied. He didn't really want to offer his services, but he knew that it would make him seem like a better person in King's mother's eyes, so he did. Alright, just wait a few more minutes. You can join Izuku on the couch over there if you want. Ban smiled and walked over to the couch King was sitting on, then he sat down right in the middle of the couch, making both of the couch's cushions sink towards him. Ban watched in amusement as King desperately tried to grab onto the armrest, then onto the pillows, failing every time. King slowly slid towards the middle where Ban was sitting, and that was when he had enough. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. When Izuku was halfway to Ban, he decided he'd had enough, and so he picked up Chastifol and floated off the couch, trying to end Ban's amusement. Unfortunately, this just made Ban even more amused as he started laughing. Izuku's face flushed red. Stop laughing at me. It's not funny. However, this just elicited more laughing from Ban. As Ban laughed, he managed to say a few words. Wire. Face. Ha. Eye is tomato. Ha. Red. After this was out of his mouth, Ban just continued laughing, desperately trying to keep the towel covering his indecent parts. AKA, I don't want to write about weird stuff like that cause I'm a female version and I've never seen one before. Smiley face. Izuku huffed. Isn't that your fault? Stop laughing at me. Mom's watching, you know. Inko smiled at her son and his friend's antics. Boys, dinner's ready. Come to the table if you want food. Inko Midoriya, age 31. Inko was surprised when her one shout of dinner caught the attention of both young men. After hearing her shout of dinner, both Izuku and Ban instantly turned to look her way. Izuku nodded and floated over, placing his pillow on his seat before landing his butt on top of the pillow. Ban stood up and scratched his neck, redoing his towel to make it stay in its place better. Then he walked over to the dining table and sat down beside Izuku as Inko brought in the food. I don't know what Japanese people eat, so imagine the food yourselves. Inko smiled as she watched Ban clean the dishes. She thought about Ban's story and she just couldn't understand. Why would Ban's parents throw out such a good kid? He could probably cook considering he'd offered to help in the kitchen, and he could clean. He even had the decency to keep a towel tied around his waist when he didn't have any clothes on. So, Inko resolved to be as kind to Ban as she could. He was such a good kid. Inko sighed happily, sipping slowly on her mug of tea as she sat on the couch watching TV dramas. Ban age? When Ban finished cleaning the dishes, he walked over to the room that said Izuku on the door sign and walked in. King was there, sitting on his bed, reading a book about world history. Hey King. Ban greeted. King nodded, and pointed towards a futon that had been laid out on the floor at the foot of his bed. Ah. Isn't the host supposed to sleep on the futon? Normally? But I refuse to let you sleep on my bed. Then let's share. This bed is bigger than the one we shared at the boar hat. It should be fine. King groaned, putting down his book. I also made you some clothes. They're on the futon over there, now go get dressed. I don't want you sleeping naked in my bed, even if I'm not sleeping in it. Ban walked over to the futon, and upon closer inspection, there were indeed clothes made in King's style on the futon. Putting on the clothes, Ban felt that they were, indeed, exactly his size and thus, everything from the underwear to the shirt, fit him perfectly. Hey King. When'd you measure all my sizes? Ban asked, genuinely curious. How could I not know your sizes perfectly? We slept in the same bed for years. Years? King yelled. Wait, you were measuring my sizes when I slept? Ban asked, slightly bothered by the mental image he had. I think you're forgetting something important. But then again you were asleep. Anyways, when you slept you would often latch onto me. That's how I know your sizes. King replied. Now I want to sleep, so pick. Bed or futon? Ban chose the bed. King groaned again, but didn't complain any more than that as he snuggled into the futon, hugging Chastiful. Tomorrow would hopefully be a better day. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku woke up a little bit stiff and extremely sleep-deprived. He was not used to sleeping on a futon. He did, after all, have a perfectly comfortable bed that he had gotten very used to sleeping in. Speaking of said bed, Ban was still sleeping soundly in it, his snores as loud as ever. Izuku was rather happy that yesterday was not just a hallucination and that Ban was actually there. Ban was most certainly not Izuku's favorite member of the Sins, but he was still one of Izuku's precious friends that he needed to protect, not that Ban really needed protecting. It was also for this reason that Izuku stayed up late the night before making fresh clothes for Ban and let Ban sleep in his bed. He cared about him. Izuku got up off the floor and rolled the futon up. He had another day of school today and it would probably be just as boring as it was the day before, but it was all for the sake of becoming a hero, so he tolerated it. As Izuku was putting on his uniform, Ban woke up. He yawned and got out of bed, ignoring Izuku in favor of putting on some other clothes that Izuku had stayed up late to make the night before. After the two of them finished getting dressed, Ban walked out of Izuku's room, presumably to go help Inko in the kitchen, while Izuku packed up his things for school. Not long after Ban left the room, the delicious smell of food flowed throughout the small apartment. Izuku left his room, his bag packed and at the door and Chastiful in his hand, and trudged into the dining room. Inko Midoriya, age 31. Inko watched as her young-looking son walked into the kitchen, green pillow in hand. He never went anywhere without it. His friend, Ban, was such a good kid. Again, Inko wondered who in their right minds would kick out such a kind child. He was also a good cook. How he was unable to find a job was unknown to Inko, but she assumed it was probably because of his quirk, if he had one. Inko knew that quirklessness was rather rare, but he hadn't shown any signs of having any type of quirk. He also hadn't talked about his quirk when he introduced himself, which, honestly, wasn't that strange. Anyways, as she watched her sleep-deprived son walk into the dining room, she knew immediately that he needed one thing, and one thing only. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku trudged into the dining room, moving slowly towards his usual spot at the table. When he got to the chair, he plopped Chastiful down onto the seat and sat down on top of the large green pillow. As soon as he sat down, Inko came over to the table and placed whatever she had made for breakfast down in front of Izuku along with a mug of black coffee. "Thanks, Mom. What time is it?" Izuku asked, sipping at his coffee. "It's 7:48. Ban answered. Hearing this, Izuku sped up his meal, not wanting to be late for school. When he was finished, he rushed to the door, grabbed his things and floated as fast as possible to the train station. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. When Izuku got to UA, the building was surrounded by news reporters and journalists, asking students what it was like to have All Might as a teacher. Izuku floated slowly towards the front gates, making as little sound as possible, hoping to not be noticed. Unfortunately, there was no escaping the attention and he was quickly surrounded by the press, asking him one question. "Hey, what's it like to have All Might teach you?" A woman with brown hair tied up in a ponytail, wearing a blue suit asked loudly. Izuku sighed. He hated having attention on him. He was, after all, a falsely accused criminal in his past life, and now, it seemed like second nature to want to avoid attention as much as possible. So he vanished. Well, not actually. He just flew away so fast it looked like he'd teleported, leaving a baffled crowd of people to go bother other students. Just as he wanted, the press left him alone and went on to bother several other students including Uraraka, Ida, Kaken and even Aizawa. When they didn't get any of the responses they wanted, they were inevitably unsatisfied, but none of the press tried to follow any of them in. Except for the woman in the blue suit. Angered, she tried to follow Aizawa into UA, but before she could even get through the front gate, an alarm blared and all the gates were blocked by layers upon layers of heavy metal, effectively stopping the woman. Izuku watched in amusement from a window in the hallway. He knew it shouldn't amuse him, but he couldn't help it. After the little scene with the gate, Izuku went to his classroom and waited for class to start. Aizawa walked into the room, stopping behind the podium in front of the class. Let's start. First thing you're gonna do today. Aizawa trailed off purposefully to create a sense of suspense. Everyone in the classroom gulped, thinking they were probably going to do something strange again. Everyone, except Izuku, who didn't really care all that the teacher asked something of him, he would oblige for the sake of history. Aizawa continued, cutting off the nervous suspense in the room. Is decide on a class representative. Everyone who had previously gulped breathed a sigh of relief. No doubt thinking about how normal it was. Izuku didn't particularly care. As long as he wasn't chosen as the class rep, he would be content. As soon as the collective sigh of relief was done, the entire class erupted into a chorus of noise. Basically, everyone was yelling, "Pick me!" in their own way. Suddenly, one voice rang above all the others. "Silence!" Ida yelled. The job of class representative is a job filled with the responsibility of leading others. It is not a job that just anyone can do. You must have the trust of all those around you. We should use democracy to decide on a class representative. Therefore, I propose an election. Everyone stared dumbfounded at Ida. After all, he was the one whose hand was raised the highest in an attempt to make the others choose him. Izuku chuckled. They were all such interesting people. Annoying sometimes, but interesting. But why a vote? Won't everyone just vote for themselves? Azui asked. Izuku had to admit she had a point. That's why, if we vote, then whoever gets votes is the most suitable for being class representative. Ida countered. I guess. Azui said, acceptance in her voice. What do you think? So, they voted. When the results came up, Izuku shook his head and put his arms up in an X position in front of his chest. No. I refuse to be the class representative. Too much responsibility for me. But you're the strongest out of all of us and you can clearly plan things. One of the students, Momo Yaoyorozu, argued. Yeah, well, I don't want to be the class rep. You do it instead. You got lots of votes too. Izuku said as calmly as he could. He really wanted to use his frustrated voice, but he thought it would make him seem like a bad person, so he decided against it. Just take the DMN job. If these idiots voted for you, then clearly they must want you to take on the responsibilities. Fucked. Kaken yelled. Izuku sighed and made plans to push the position onto someone else later. He did not know, however, that his plans were not going to be needed. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was in the cafeteria, sitting at a table and eating with Uraraka and Ida. Hey Midoriya? I'm gonna be honest with you, recently I've been having strange dreams. I was reminded of them when you were sleep-talking. Anyways, I'm sure it's just a harmless little dream, but you wanna hear it? She asked. Izuku was intrigued, so he nodded his head. Yes, so. In the dream I'm this giant lady called Diane, and I'm traveling with a bunch of people called the Sins who own this tavern called the Boar Hat? It's weird. Anyways, we go to this place called Vasil looking for my sacred treasure, whatever it is. Then this girl called Elizabeth and I go and search for food but run into this huge mushroom that turns us both small. Then I enter the fighting festival and fight a bunch of guys. Then the dream ends just before the final round where I'm supposed to fight Captain. It's really weird and I was reminded of it because you were mumbling about someone named Diane in your sleep. Izuku sighed. So this was why she reminded him of Diane. Because she was Diane. She just hadn't recovered all of her memories. Izuku wondered what he could do to help Diane recover her memories properly. He honestly had no idea. He'd never been reincarnated before this life, so he had no idea what type of stuff triggered past life memories. All he knew was that he'd had his memories from birth. That was when the school alarm went off. A female voice broadcasted over the speakers announcing that there was a level 3 emergency and that everyone had to evacuate. The stampede that followed was not fun at all. Ida and Uraraka got separated while Izuku floated over the crowd leisurely. Tenya Ida, age 15. The crowd was insane to say the least. There were way too many students trying to push their way out in too little space. As a result, Tenya was pushed to the window, separated from his two friends. He looked out the window to see who the intruder was, only to see the press. Formulating a plan to calm everyone down, he searched for Uraraka, who was promptly dropped right in front of him after his call. Tenya looked up to see Midoriya floating in the air. He must have picked up Uraraka so she wouldn't get squished, then heard his call and dropped her off there. Tenya said a very loud thanks to Midoriya over the screaming, to which he got a slight nod. Uraraka, I need you to make me float, please and thank you. Tenya said. Uraraka complied and patted him on the back, making him float. He charged up his engines and pushed forward, smashing himself into the exit sign in the position of the person on the exit sign. Midoriya laughed at him, and Tenya felt the slightest bit of embarrassment before he yelled out into the hallway. Calm down everyone. It's just the press. We have to calm down and evacuate like civilized people. This got the attention of everyone in the halls. Everyone stopped at the start of the yell. Then, after Tenya was done, they all walked out calmly. Tenya sighed, a good job well done. After the whole cafeteria catastrophe, Midoriya resigned from his position of class representative and Tenya was elected the new class representative. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was content that the job of class representative was no longer his. The rest of the classes had gone rather smoothly and Izuku was now on his way home. I know the USJ happens the same day, but I'm changing it, 'cause I need more Ban. Today, they were going to get Ban some proper clothes so that Izuku wouldn't have to keep making clothes for him. Izuku was not at all excited to go shopping with Ban because he would inevitably get teased a lot during the shopping trip, and Izuku did not at all enjoy teasing. So, he was floating home to collect Ban and his mother and leave his school stuff at home along the way. When he got back, he yelled out a short greeting before entering his room, placing his backpack at the foot of his bed and changing into more comfortable clothes. Then he left his room to find Ban and Inko sitting on the couch watching TV. Hey, if we're gonna buy Ban some clothes, we should head out before it gets dark. Izuku informed the two sitting on the couch. Ban looked at Izuku and nodded, getting up, while Inko just sat there and continued drinking some kind of tea. Izuku, I don't think I'll go with you guys. I'm sorry, I've just had a long day at work and I'm too tired to go shopping with two energetic young men. I hope you guys have fun. Inko winked, no doubt trying to encourage them to catch up, or something. I hope you have a nice rest at home. We'll be off now. See you later. Izuku said to Inko. She smiled and waved from the couch as they left the apartment. Ban age? Ban walked with King towards a local mall where they would buy him some clothes. Ban was well versed in more modern fashion, but he still couldn't help but want something that looked like his good old red leather suit. The one where the first top was destroyed by a certain fairy king who was floating beside him. He was still mad about that. He looked down at his now green-haired companion. So, do you know anything about any of the other sins? King asked, breaking the silence. Nope. Last I heard, Diane died of old age. Escaner's probably also dead. He was after all just a normal human with an extraordinary magical ability. The captain is probably still alive somewhere, Merlin as well. I don't know anything about Gauther though. Ban replied. Do you know anything about any of them? I found Diane. She also got reincarnated, but she doesn't seem to remember ever being Diane. She's in my class at UA and her name's Uraraka Ochako. She described a dream where she was at the Vasel Fighting Festival. A memory from Diane when we were fighting in the festival for Gideon. I'm not sure how to make her recover from her memory loss, but I'm sure it's only temporary. King answered. Ban was rather surprised that Diane had also been reincarnated. The world was stranger than he'd originally thought it to be. Looks like we're here. King exclaimed as he gestured to a large building that had the words, Happy, and Mall, printed side by side on the front. The building, however, was the exact opposite of Happy. It looked a little run down, paint chipped in places and dust coating the windows. Are you sure we're at the right place? Ban asked King, who nodded excitedly. This place has the cheapest clothes in the whole district. It's a lot more mall-like on the inside though. King assured. Ban sighed. Whatever you say, shorty. Hey, I'm not that short. Yes, actually you are that short. You've gotten shorter. You were taller in your past life. Well, it's not my fault, I was already shorter in this life. It's something called genetics. Anyways, let's go in instead of standing out here talking. We're wasting time arguing. So, they entered the shabby-looking building. True to King's words, the inside of the building was, indeed, a lot more mall-like than the outside. There were many, many people. Inside the mall, some with groups of friends, some alone, some holding way too many bags and some holding none. Ban did not have time to inspect the inside of the mall though because King had already taken off to one of the shops that sold clothes. Ban, come over here. I think this store will suit your tastes. Ban sighed, again, and walked over to where King was floating, chastifol in hand. So began the legendary shopping spree that left Ban tired as if he'd just escaped from hell and King glowing like Chastifol's seventh form, luminosity. By the end of the trip, Ban was holding about 20 bags, all from different stores, each containing 3 to 5 pieces of clothing. Ban felt like he'd be set for the rest of his life, with this many clothes. King, seemingly satisfied, dragged a dying Ban, who was covered in bags, out of Happy Mall and all the way back home. Ban vowed that day to never go clothes shopping with King ever again, lest he seek death. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku left for school in the morning after eating a delicious breakfast courtesy of Ban and Inko working together. They had, apparently, been using the times when Izuku was at school to figure out new recipes and make old ones better. Of course, nothing could ever beat Inko's katsudon and they hadn't tweaked that recipe in fear of Izuku's wrath. Izuku set off to school, floating happily on his chastifol. Today, he decided that he'd fly above the crowd to school so as to avoid the press. When he got to, he flew over the fences, successfully avoiding the annoying woman in the blue suit who was now wearing a gray suit. This was a special day. Class 1A was going to go on a field trip to the USJ for some kind of activity. Izuku was just happy that he would get to see the Universal Studios Japan branch. He wondered what kind of activity the hero course could possibly have scheduled in a theme park. He was really curious. Unfortunately, he had no idea that USJ did not, in fact, stand for Universal Studios Japan but rather Unforeseen Simulation Joint. He would also be sorely mistaken in believing it would be a peaceful trip. After all, some villains were going to attack them. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku sat in the bus, in costume, beside Azui and Sato. He was rather disappointed to find out that USJ did not stand for Universal Studios Japan, but rather Unforeseen Simulation Joint. The conversation between the students was going everywhere, from quirks to how people knew each other. I say whatever comes to my mind. Midoriya? Azui said, earning Izuku's attention. Yes, Azui? What do you need? Please just call me Tsu. Your quirk is kinda weird, isn't it? You can fly. You can change that pillow of yours into other things and you can make it float. What exactly is your quirk? Azui pressed. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have a quirk. I use magic. Izuku said. Either all his classmates were dense as a wall of iron or they didn't hear him, because they all just nodded. I see, so your quirk is called magic. Kirishima said, his hand on his chin in a thinking position. Izuku thought about it for a moment and decided that it would be a good cover-up for his past life if he ever needed one. Still though, your quirk is super flashy. Like, pro-level flashy. Mine's useful but it's not all that flashy. All I do is harden my body. Kirishima sighed, hardening his hand as an example. Izuku shook his head. That's not true, Kirishima. Your quirk doesn't have to be flashy to be pro-level. And besides, it's better to be useful than to be flashy. Izuku said, trying to comfort Kirishima. You think so? Thanks, man. Kirishima replied happily. My naval laser is pro-level in both flashiness and strength. Aoyama said, smiling at the audience. Too bad it gives you stomachaches when you use it for too long. Ashido added on, patting a paling Aoyama. If you're talking about flashy and strong, aren't Todoroki and Bakugo the best? Kirishima continued. Kaken, taking notice of the conversation, gave Kirishima a nice and nasty teeth before turning to look at the window. But Bakugo's always mad though, so he doesn't seem like he'll be a popular hero. Azui said, getting Kaken's attention instantly. What the hell, you frog freak? You pickin' a fight? He yelled, further proving Azui's point. Azui took advantage of this and gave everyone an innocent-sounding "see" while pointing at Kaken. Izuku chuckled a bit. The conversation, though very different, somewhat reminded him of the friendly banter between the Sins when they were still together. How he missed those days. We haven't been together that long, and yet we already know your personality is sheets steeped in sewage. Amazing. Kaminari laughs, causing Kaken to get even angrier than he already was. Leaning over the railing, Kaken began yelling at Kaminari while Jiro leaned away from him. A few more comments about the yelling came before Mr. Aizawa shut them up. "Stop fooling around, guys. We're here," he said as a huge glass dome came into view. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku gazed in awe at the huge glass dome they were standing outside of. Well, floating for Izuku. It certainly wasn't the most amazing structure he's ever seen, but it was still pretty impressive. Outside of the big dome stood what Izuku assumed was the person who was going to help teach them. The person was wearing a suit designed to look like an old-fashioned space suit, and Izuku recognized it to be 13, a hero who specialized in rescuing people. "It's the space hero, 13. Uraraka squealed happily. "I love 13. 13 pointed to the big dome in a gesture that said, "You first. Let us enter without any more delay," she said. "The fandom said 13 was female, so I'm making 13 female here. It's not like it really makes a difference." Half the students bowed and the other half did not, but they all said the same thing at the same time. It was impressive how in sync they were. "We look forward to working with you," they all said. Then, without further ado, they went into the big glass dome. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. The inside of the glass dome looked like Universal Studios Japan, and someone voiced their thoughts in the form of an exclamation. "Wow. It looks like Universal Studios Japan. A fire, a landslide, a snowstorm, etc. You never really know what kind of disaster is going to happen, and so I created this place. A training ground to train in different circumstances and learn to rescue in different disasters. It's called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or the USJ for short. But you already knew that," 13 said, animatedly. "All right, let's begin," Mr. Aizawa said from beside 13. Before we begin, I have a couple things I need to tell you. Anyways, I have some stuff to say to you before we begin," 13 said cheerfully, making the class sweat drop. "I'm sure you all know about my quirk, Black Hole. I can SCK up anything and turn it into dust." Uraraka squealed a bit more. "You've used that quirk to save countless people, right?" "Yes. But if I'm not careful, my quirk is one that can easily kill people. I'm sure that some of you also have quirk like that. In our superhuman society, quirks are very strictly regulated, and as such, it doesn't seem like much of a problem at first. However, don't ever forget that there are many, many quirks that can kill if the user isn't careful. With Mr. Aizawa's quirk assessment, you discovered more about your own hidden potential, and with All Might's combat training exercise, you learned of the danger that comes with using your quirks against other people. Today's class will be a clean slate. You will learn how to save people with your quirks. You do not have power to harm others, but rather to help and protect others. I hope you guys fully understand this before the end of today. That is all. Thank you for listening to my speech," 13 said. At the end of her speech, the class cheered for her. "All right, first let's dash," Mr. Aizawa began, but he was cut off by himself when the power in the building went off. Both Mr. Aizawa and Izuku felt something going totally and completely wrong, and they both turned to the fountain, their guard instantly up. At the fountain, reality seemed to be distorting as a black vortex opened up, and a hand reached out dramatically, pulling the vortex larger to reveal a mop of sky blue hair and another hand with an eye peeking out between two of the fingers. Izuku changed Chastifol from its pillow form into its spear form and pointed it at the fountain while Mr. Aizawa told the children to stay put and together. 13, protect the students, he commanded. "What's that?" Kirishima asked, pointing to the plaza where people with inexplicable quirks stepped out of a black mist. "Is this like the entrance exam? Like, the lesson has already begun?" Kirishima moved forward a bit to check out what was going on but was quickly startled to a stop when Mr. Aizawa shouted at him. "Don't move," he said as he pulled his goggles up and over his eyes. "Those are villains," he revealed as the last one, a big bulky blue bird thing with its brain out in the open, stepped out of the black stuff. His revelation caused the students to gasp and sink. The black mist stuff shrunk a little and revealed itself to be a person with a strange quirk who began talking, but due to the distance between the plaza and the entrance, none of the students could really hear what he was saying. This led to that and no one responded to the villains, which seemed to make them angry. The handman began mumbling, but still, no one could hear because of the distance. Mr. Aizawa's scarf began unraveling and floating up around his head as he glared at the villains. Villains? No way. How could villains get into a school for heroes? Kirishima asked, leaning forward to get a better look at the villains. His actions earned him a quick shout from Mr. Aizawa. "What did I tell you to do that you are not doing right now? I told you not to move. Now get back." His voice was deep as he spoke, and he pointed behind him toward the rest of the students who were obeying his command. Izuku shook his head. "Mr. Aizawa, you know you can't beat them all alone while protecting the students. Even if 13 is here. Besides, 13 specializes in rescues, not fighting. Therefore I propose that I take out as many as I can with a ranged attack before you jump in." Izuku bargained. Mr. Aizawa shook his head. "No. It's too dangerous. Even if it's a ranged attack, the villains will most certainly come up to try and find you," he replied. Izuku sighed. "Well, Isikes to be you. I'm doing it anyway." Izuku signed some commands for Chastifol and the spear sped off towards the plaza and dove into the ground right before the villains. A few seconds later, villains were startled by the appearance of a giant flower that suddenly sprouted out of the ground. A couple hand movement later, golden lasers were decimating the villains, not even leaving ash behind. Mr. Aizawa stared in shock at the display of power. He sighed. "All right, Midoriya, I give up. Do whatever you want, as long as you don't get close," he grumbled. Izuku cheered and called Oslo, who he found he could still call for some reason. The others at the top of the stairs watched in fascination as a weird green dog appeared and began talking to Izuku. They watched as the dog opened its mouth and spat out a very large, brown warhammer. It was too big for any normal-sized human, but it was also too small for someone MT Lady-sized. The fandom said that MT Lady is 20 meters taller than twice as tall as Diane. I personally think they looked about the same height, but I don't know. In case you wanted to know, Big MT Lady is 2,062 centimeters tall when she's tall and Diane is 915 centimeters when she's tall. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako watched, grossed out, as the dog spat out a very, very large brown warhammer which she recognized as Gideon. She had no idea how she knew its name, she just did. She felt drawn to the large hammer. Almost as though it was calling out to her and claiming her as its rightful owner. So drawn to it was she that she didn't notice her feet moving on their own. Unbeknownst to her, Ochako's eyes flashed purple for a moment before returning to their normal brown color as she continued walking forward. When she was an arm's reach from the handle, hesitantly, she reached a hand out and touched the hammer, and all her uneasy feelings from her dreams vanished as everything clicked into place. Suddenly, everything made sense. She was never Ochako Uraraka. She was never meant to be Ochako Uraraka. She was Diane. Tsuyu Azui, age 15. Tsuyu had noticed her friend's strange behavior when the giant hammer came out of the dog. She had also noticed Ochako's eyes flash purple as she walked slowly towards the huge hammer. She was just observant like that. That meant that she also noticed it when a strange shadow came across her friend's eyes as she looked down after placing a hand on the hammer. Tsuyu didn't know what to do. On the one hand, her friend could have just been messing around, but Tsuyu couldn't shake the feeling that her friend's strange behavior was not a joke. Tsuyu was approaching Ochako when she noticed something odd. Her friend's hero suit seemed tighter than it was before. So, she examined her friend a bit closer. Tsuyu was extremely uncharacteristically surprised when she saw Ochako just pop a couple centimeters larger all around. She had no idea what was happening to her friend, and frankly, she was worried. Ochako, are you aware that you're growing little by little right now? She asked. She received a nod in response. Yes, I'm fully aware that I'm growing and I'm rather happy about it. You see, I'm growing back into my right size and please, call me Diane. She replied and turned to smile at Tsuyu, revealing her purple eyes. Tsuyu could only gasp. She had no idea how to react to her friend's sudden change in both attitude and appearance. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Diane was awake. Izuku could tell from the sudden surge in power and size of one Uraraka Ochako. Izuku floated over Gideon to get a better look at Diane. His crush on her was long gone, but it was still nice to see another comrade from the old days. He could see that she was growing and that soon her current clothes would tear, leaving her totally and completely uncovered, so he called Oslo closer and went through him into his room to gather the clothes he'd made for her when he'd found her. In his room, on his bed, sat one very bored Ban who immediately took notice of him. "Oh, King, what ya doin'?" he asked moderately loudly. Izuku flinched. We had this field trip and things went wrong, so I decided to try and awaken Diane with Gideon and it worked, and now she's growing slowly. I don't want the students to see her naked, so I came here to fetch the clothes I made for her. He explained. Ban placed his hand on his chin and thought for a moment before smirking. What went wrong? If there's a fight involved, can I come along? I'm dying for some action. Izuku chuckled nervously. Villains attacked us as we were about to get started on a class assignment. Ban's eyes practically sparkled as he heard this. I've decided I'm coming along with you. If you say no, I'll trash your room and blame you for it. He laughed. Izuku sighed. Fine, you can come along. He relented and called Oslo to transport them back to the USJ for a good fight. Tenya Ida, age 15. Tenya was dumbfounded. His friend, the small fluffy broccoli also known as Midoriya, had summoned some kind of dog out of nowhere. Then the dog got very big and spat out a giant's warhammer, and now his other friend, Uraraka, was slowly getting bigger and bigger while the dog Midoriya had summoned ate him. He was even more confused when the dog disappeared only for Midoriya to reappear with a strange man who was smiling like a battle junkie. Along with the strange man, Midoriya also brought an enormous amount of cloth that was shaped strangely. It looked like he was holding humongous clothes and Tenya had no idea why. Maybe they were for the ever-expanding Uraraka. He though but then shook the idea, as Uraraka probably wouldn't get that big. Then, the giant sunflower stopped its barrage of lasers on the villains, leaving about a quarter of their original numbers, and Mr. Aizawa jumped into action before anyone else could act. Midoriya, leave that civilian out of this mess. I don't know what you were thinking, but he won't make it. Also 13 and Kaminari, try to contact the school for backup. He yelled on his way down. As he was about to land, a few villains got in his way and tried to attack him. He responded to this by erasing their quirks and pulling them up with his capture weapon and smashing them into each other headfirst, knocking them out. After knocking out the first trio, he proceeded to jump right into the remaining crowd of villains that had survived the sunflower. Hey, is that guy just going to take them all on by himself? That's not fair. I came here to get physical, not watch someone else fight. Tenya heard an unfamiliar voice yell. He turned to the source and saw the turquoise-haired young man pointing at the plaza. What did you expect? This is a hero school after all. Of course the hero teachers would jump in to protect their students and civilians. If you want to fight those weaklings so badly, then go down there yourself. Midoriya yelled back, smacking the stranger on the back. The stranger nodded and grinned. Then he jumped right into the fray, dodging attacks from villains and Mr. Aizawa and then taking villains out with his fists, grinning all the while. Then, a black mist started to form at the entrance and Tenya could only think one thing before the mist materialized into a somewhat human-shaped thing. Oh crap. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku had felt the mist man coming from a mile away, and he hurriedly dumped the clothes in his arms over the still-growing Diane before calling Chastifol over to him so he could use it. He made some hand signs and Chastifol in its spear form went flying towards the black mist man. The mist man noticed this and opened a portal right in front of Chastifol, sending it flying out the other side towards Diane who was halfway to her true size. To the mist man's surprise, Diane simply turned around and slapped it back towards him, so he opened another portal and sent it towards one of the kids, specifically Kirishima, who hardened himself in preparation. Izuku knew that Chastifol would simply break through Kirishima's hardening, so he made some more hand movements and stopped Chastifol right in front of Kirishima's face, scaring the crap out of him. Enough of this childish game of ping-pong. The mist man exclaimed as he expanded in size, covering the whole group of students. But before he could teleport them, Diane turned to him in all her former glory, picked him up, and threw him halfway across the UA, earning a few dumbfounded looks from the villains in the plaza. Diane, now her original size, picked up Gideon and jumped down the stairs onto the plaza. She twirled Gideon in her hands a little, before swinging it close to the ground, killing half the villains and knocking out the other half, who were shielded by the bodies. After the swing, there were no more villains left in the plaza, apart from the Mist Man, the Hand Man, and the Bird Brain. "Hey, Diane. Why'd you go and do that?" "I wanted to have some more fun fighting." Ban yelled from beneath Diane. "I wanted to join in on the fun too." "No." She yelled back at him. Izuku floated down to the plaza as well, followed by the students, minus Ida, who had gone to get back up for some reason. "Guys. Stop fighting. There are still 3 opponents left, you know." Izuku shouted, gaining the attention of the other sins. "I call Bird Brain." Ban yelled, rushing in. "Nomu, kill him." Handman ordered and Bird Brain rushed forward at insane speeds. Well, they were insane to the normal human, normal speeds for a holy knight, or a sin. Bird Brain wound up its fist for a punch that his Ban head on, blowing away half his torso. Blood sprayed everywhere along with Ban's innards. Ban lay in many pieces on the ground, 50 meters away from Bird Brain. The students gasped. "Midoriya, what did I tell you about civilians? You're the cause of a civilian death today. You're the cause of your friend's death. I should expel you." Mr. Aizawa shouted. "Relax, he'll be fine," Izuku said in a nonchalant way. "That's it. Your ex-dash. That hurt." Ban groaned. Then he grinned. "You worry for me?" Shota Aizawa, age 30. Shota was too tired for this. They had originally planned a trip to the USJ for rescue training. Then villains had appeared in the plaza area of the facility. Then, Midoriya had pulled up a giant sunflower that shot lasers out of nowhere, demolishing half the villains. After that, he had summoned some kind of demon dog that spat out a giant warhammer. The warhammer had also changed one of his students into a giant even though she didn't have a size-changing quirk. As she grew, Shota noticed that she was going to need some giant clothes to fit her, but before he could do anything, Midoriya got eaten by his demon dog. Then Midoriya had returned from the demon dog thing with a civilian. So, he decided to jump into the villains whose numbers were halved thanks to Midoriya's giant sunflower. He did not expect the civilian to jump into the battle with the villains and actually be able to hold his own. But he couldn't really do anything about it. When they were almost done with the villains, Uraraka, who had grown a good 750 or so centimeters, jumped down and swung the warhammer, getting rid of the rest of the villains. After all this, Midoriya calmly floated down the stairs as the civilian, who was apparently named Ban, argued with Uraraka while calling her Diane. Shota was confused and done with this year's 1A. He didn't want to deal with these crazy people who knew other crazy people. He had been about to take on the bird thing when Ban rushed in and got himself killed. Shota was beyond furious that one of his students had gotten, presumably innocent civilian, who was also their friend, killed. He was about to expel Midoriya for his calm demeanor that was so wrong for someone who had just gotten a friend killed when said friend stood up, his body whole, like nothing had ever happened. "Ban, don't do that again." Midoriya scolded. "What, were you worried that I'd actually died and wouldn't be able to give you cuddles anymore?" Ban teased. Midoriya's face flushed pink, indicating that the teasing was about something that actually happened. "It's not like it's my fault the captain only built 2 rooms in his tavern. Besides, I would have been perfectly content with sleeping outside on Chastifol if it weren't for your messes that I always seem to have to clean up." Midoriya yelled. Then the bird thing attacked again as they were arguing. Shota didn't know whether or not he should do anything, considering the power that the two had already shown, and his moment of hesitance proved to be acceptable, as Midoriya moved his hands around a bit and the spear he had came down the stairs and changed into a two-pronged spear. The two-pronged spear then promptly stabbed itself into the bird thing's chest, turning it to stone. King, why'd you have to turn it to stone? I wanted to play with it some more. Ban whined. Damn it. It's game over. They killed the gnome. That's cheating. They cheated. Kurogyri, let's go. Get us out of here. The handman whined childishly. They were about to teleport out, when Shota used his capture weapon to grab the manchild. The manchild screamed, startling Shota, but not enough to let go. To Shota's surprise, the manchild turned towards him and walked, his hand outstretched. Then, suddenly, the mist man opened a portal beneath his feet and the manchild fell through, pulling Shota down too. Before Shota fell into the portal, however, the mist man closed it, severing his capture weapon, and making him land face first on the ground. Shota gave up. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku watched in amusement as his teacher just lay there, face on the ground. He didn't even care that Handman and the Mist Man got away. What was two villains getting away compared to the massive amounts of villains they'd killed and knocked out? Izuku pulled out his phone and opened the camera app, taking a few pictures and a short video of Mr. Aizawa lying face first on the ground, before putting it away. It was after this action that all, figurative, hell broke loose. The students crowded around Ban asking many different questions. Can I have your number? What's your name? Your muscles are so toned. How did you do that thing where you came back to life? What's with the scar on your face? Ban looked like he was going to murder someone or something until Izuku yelled at the students. Guys, stop. You're annoying him. His name is Ban. He does not have a phone. The thing where he came back to life was his quirk. His scar is a personal story that he will tell you himself if he feels like it. Izuku said, if you guys want to talk to him, don't bombard him with questions, just talk to him like you would a normal person. Idiots. Kaken walked up beside Izuku. So, is this guy one of your 7 deadly sins guys? He asked. Yeah, this guy's Ban. I found him a few days ago. He's been staying with my mom and I since. Izuku replied. What about Round Face? What happened to her? I found out a few days ago that she was Diane, another of the sins in her past life. Diane was a giant, so her body changed to match Diane's soul when she recovered her memories. I think she's no longer Uraraka but Diane and only Diane. Izuku answered. I see. Diane age? Diane was confused. She had suddenly woken up from a very long time asleep, and she had no idea what was going on. Ban was standing near her feet and he was surrounded by young humans. Or at least she assumed they were humans. There was a girl with pink skin and Diane had no idea whether or not to classify her as human. She looked around, taking in the full appearance of her surroundings. She was in a very large glass dome that had multiple smaller, more colorful domes in it. It also had some big rocks and a small pond that humans might argue were not very small. There were some stairs that she remembered jumping down to get to the area she was in, but that was about it. All she remembered before the top of the stairs was dying, and it was not pleasant. As she looked around more, she spotted a small green-haired boy who was floating on Chastifol beside an ash-blonde boy. Chastifol, King's sacred treasure. Diane reached one conclusion: the green-haired boy was King. So, she walked over towards them, not going unnoticed by the rest of the tiny humans, so that she could greet King for the first time in years. Hey King. Hey Diane, long time no see. He replied, floating higher to face Diane. It's been such a long time. Where did you go? I traveled around and eventually ended up dying. Speaking of places, where is this? What's with the strange-looking humans? So, the first thing you want to know is that you died, which I'm sure you remember doing. I died too, but after I died, I believe my soul was thrown into this body due to it not having a soul of its own. I think it was slightly different for you. I think your soul was sealed inside of the body of a girl called Uraraka Ochako. When you saw Gideon, your soul was unsealed, but it pushed the girl's soul out. At least, that's my theory on what happened. That's why you don't remember anything after you died. Diane nodded. It made sense and gestured for King to go on. While the body still belonged to Uraraka, she wanted to be a hero, so she enrolled in a school for heroes. The school had a field trip, but then we were attacked, so I pulled out Gideon and you were unsealed. In this world, every human has developed a magical ability that they call a quirk. Some of them change their appearances, and that's how you get people like that. King said, pointing to a pink girl with small yellow horns and black scara. I understand. One last question. Where's the captain dash? She was cut off by a very loud door slamming open and one weird buff blonde guy running in, followed by other weird people who were dressed even weirder. Strange. Never fear. But I am here, he yelled, but then he looked around. What exactly happened here? Young Ida told me there were villains attacking here. I see no such thing. King flew up to the blonde guy and started explaining what had happened, gesturing to some of the tied-up villains and the stone statue of an overgrown bird whose head got chopped in half, revealing its brain. When he was done, there were other people, all in the same uniform that said, police, who were cleaning up the corpses and the knocked-out villains. Then, one of the police walked up to her and asked her to stop using her quirk and please shrink down. I don't think I can. Unless Merlin's here. This is my natural size. She replied. But I'll try anyways. Diane thought hard about shrinking down. She even closed her eyes, waiting for the familiar feeling of shrinking to come. Nothing happened. She opened her eyes and saw that she still towered over everyone else. She sighed. Tried. It seems I can't shrink down on my own. She informed the police people. Why don't you try pouring your magic power into your concentration? Ban suggested, surprising Diane. He wasn't usually smart, and when he wasn't trying to help people. That's a surprisingly good idea, Ban. But I'll try again. Diane shut her eyes once again, an image of her own body appearing in her mind. She focused some magic power into her size, willing it to change, and this time, she felt herself shrink a little. When she opened her eyes, she was human-sized. She pulled up her now very large clothes, covering herself a bit, before cheering. Now, she could live a somewhat normal life in this new world. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. All the students were evacuated a short while after the police and pro-heroes arrived. A detective counted them as they chatted outside and noticed that there were one too many children. 21. The detective man asked. Hey children, why are there 21 of you? Shouldn't you guys be a class of 20? Ban took notice of the detective's question and replied before Izuku could. I'm not part of their class. I came along for the fight, but it was really boring. Ban put his finger into his ear, making it seem like he didn't care, which he probably really didn't if Izuku knew him as well as he thought he knew him. I see, the detective said, more than a little confused. Behind the detective, some police officers came out with more detained villains. After the police arrived and the students were rescued, someone had a marvelous thought. What if there are more villains in there? They asked someone else, causing the police to search the whole USJ, which, in turn, lead to the discovery of more villains in the building. Villains was a bit of a stretch though. Most of the people in the USJ were just thugs, weak and a bit scared that kids could kill. Izuku wanted to laugh. The only kids who'd fought were Diane, Ban and Izuku himself, and none of them were actually children. Speaking of Diane, it appeared that her soul had receded back into Uraraka, changing her appearance back into the bouncy gravity girl. Uraraka herself did not remember anything after she touched Gideon and woke Diane's soul, and Izuku found it rather peculiar. Izuku supposed that it was kind of like having a split personality, except in Diane's case, she was sealed inside of another's soul, only awakening when the other was in direct contact with something important to her. Izuku was going to be honest, he had no idea what triggered Diane's awakening nor what would trigger it again. Regardless, Izuku, with the help of Oslo, his Gideon away again so as to avoid Uraraka randomly changing into Diane. Of course, Izuku couldn't read minds yet, so he had no way of knowing what was going on in the brunette's mind, which was just the information he needed. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako was confused. One moment she was in the USJ touching a giant warhammer, The next she was standing outside the USJ with police arresting thugs everywhere. The strange voice in her head that hadn't been there before was not helping one bit. Besides, she couldn't even hear it properly, it was just garbled speech about tests. I didn't kill off Ochako or Diane. Ochako is important, okay? I wouldn't kill her off no matter how annoying she was. Smiley face. What about tests? They didn't have any tests recently, did they? They weren't about to have one either, right? Test. Can. Hear me? There it was again, the strange girl's voice that kept appearing randomly. Ochako was mad and confused and scared. Everything was going badly. Ochako could safely say that today was the worst day of her life so far. Diane H? Diane was also confused. Confusion seemed to be a common feeling lately. From dying, to suddenly having to have to fight thugs in strange buildings to this. By this, Diane meant that she was stuck in some weird room with a very large TV that appeared to be playing someone's life from their perspective. There was blinking, looking around, focusing. It was annoying how strangely the girl's focusing worked. 1 second she was focusing on floating gloves and the next she was focusing down towards the ground, exposing her gender to Diane. Diane was not trapped like most of you believe. She could move around freely in the mindscape of her host. The mindscape itself was a room. An acceptably furnished room, complete with anything anyone might need to survive. There was a kitchen, filled neatly with food, dishes and other kitchen stuff as well as torture tools. Seriously, other than torture, what else could the jug with blades in it be used for? The living room area had a few couches, all pointing towards a TV that was either connected to a game console or was playing the life of the girl. There was also a bathroom that had a door, which Diane thanked Lord on high for, and a trio of doors that, 2 of which Diane couldn't open. The one she could open was a bedroom that suited her tastes perfectly. It had a few unknown objects, but she liked it anyway. All in all, it was a cozy and homey mindscape. Diane was yelling at the TV that played her host's life. Hey, testing. Can you hear me? She was also getting no replies. Diane sighed. She also seemed to be sighing a lot more recently. She trudged back into the room she could open and flopped on the bed, reaching for the light to turn it off. Her hand did not touch the light switch, instead, closing around a peculiar object. It was orange and shaped like a rectangular cracker, but it was thicker than a cracker should be and didn't look like a regular cracker. Curious, Diane pulled it closer to her face. She sniffed it a bit and then bit down hard on it. It did not break, nor did it taste very good. Diane grabbed it by the pole and shook it a bit until it opened up like a clam, revealing a lot of small crackers stuck to the bottom, each one labeled with 3 letters and a number. There were also a few that had strange, unrecognizable symbols. Diane tried to peel off the small crackers, but they refused to come off, to her dismay. So, she took a different approach. She bit down on the big cracker again, her teeth pressing into the small crackers which made them all go down. That's strange. So these things go down. Diane muttered to herself as she clicked the buttons, marveling at how fun it was. Then she saw another cracker on the side of the big cracker. She pressed down on it and the cracker made a beeping noise. The smooth side of the inside of the cracker glowed, showing an unknown symbol and a few letters that spelled a name. Oppo? Diane asked herself. Knockoff of Oppo, 'cause I thought it would be funny. Oppo is a Chinese phone company. The cracker beeped a few more times before the screen showed a contacts list that had a name at the top. Uraraka Ochako? Who's that? Diane asked herself as she played around with the cracker. A few clicks later, the cracker made a ringing sound before a click. What the hell? Are you okay, clam cracker? Diane asked the clam cracker. Who's there? The scared voice of Diane's host asked. I'm Diane. Nice to meet you. Diane said in a cheery voice. I'm Uraraka Ochako. I want to know where you are and how you're talking to my head. Diane's host asked. Oh, that's easy. I think your body hosts both of our souls, and this clam cracker magic tool connected us in some way. Clam cracker? Yeah. I found it on the nightstand. It's an orange rectangle that opens up and has even more rectangles on the inside. Are you talking about a phone? Diane got up off the bed and walked into the living room, sitting down on a couch to watch her host. Her host fumbled around in an unknown pocket before pulling out a pink clam cracker and opening it, revealing the same set of crackers as the orange one in Diane's hands. "You've got one too? What are these things?" she asked. "Can you see what I'm seeing? Like my hands and my phone in my hands?" her host asked. Diane nodded before realizing that her host couldn't hear nods through the clam cracker. "Yeah. I see it on a giant TV screen. You have a pink clam cracker in your hands." "Okay, these are called phones. I have an older model called a flip phone, but I'm sure someone has a newer model. But that doesn't matter right now. Can we talk later? I'll show you how to get in touch with me through the phone." "Okay." Diane's host gave her some directions on how to operate the phone, and Diane left the crash course, read, phone call, with a basic understanding of what a phone was and how to use it. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. After teaching the person in her head how to use a phone, Ochako looked around at her classmates who were making small talk about the attack. Some were complaining about how they didn't get to fight, others were complaining about the fact that the villains only sent street thugs that they could most certainly have beaten. All in all, it was pretty peaceful. Then Sue walked up to her. "Uraraka, how did you do the thing where you grew and then smashed people with a hammer?" she asked. Uraraka gulped a bit. How was she supposed to explain something she didn't even remember doing? Thankfully, Midoriya came running over to them along with the turquoise-haired guy from before. "Diane, can I ask you some questions?" he asked, floating over. Ochako tilted her head. "Diane?" she asked, confused. Midoriya had just called her Diane, right? Come to think of it, the weird voice in her head was also called Diane. Coincidence? Must be. "Oh, so you're Uraraka." Midoriya sighed, a bit of sadness in his voice. "Still, can I ask some questions?" "Sure. Do you remember what happened in the USJ at all?" he asked, pulling a notebook and pencil. "Out of who knows where?" "Nope, not at all. I remember the villains appearing, and the giant brass hammer. And touching the hammer, but after that everything goes black. Then, the next thing I know, I'm outside the USJ, watching the police escort villains out." Midoriya nodded, noting something down in his notebook. "Did anything strange happen after you came to?" he asked. Ochako tilted her head again, thinking about whether or not she should tell him about the voice. He did seem to know whoever it belonged to. "Yeah. I was standing around and there was this voice. It was super staticky and I could barely hear it. Then there was a sound like a phone ringing and I pulled out my phone but it wasn't ringing, so I thought about answering the phone and it clicked and I could hear the voice more clearly." Midoriya nodded, wrote some more stuff down in his notebook. "Did the voice tell you anything? Like a name, or what happened after you went out?" He pressed. "She told me her name was Diane and that we shared a body or something. Something about my body hosting two souls? Anyways, I taught her how to use a flip phone and I asked if we could talk later." "I see. I get it now. Okay, then let's go. We still have to introduce you to the rest of the class." The band person groaned and the pair walked away, leaving Ochako confused, standing beside Sue, who understood nothing except that Ochako wasn't even conscious for the attack. Ban age? Ban was tired of socializing. He'd been dragged by King over to some of his classmates to introduce him to them, and now they were talking happily, leaving Ban out of the conversation. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but he was a little bit jealous of King's classmates, being able to hold a proper conversation with him. Then again, the only reason he couldn't hold a proper conversation with King was because he'd fed things up with the original King, and this King had the memories of his first incarnation. Ban wouldn't ever tell King, but over the many years he wandered the earth, he'd met quite a few people who seemed to be King's incarnations, only none of them was his original King. The one who stole all his stolen stuffed animals and returned them to the children he'd stolen them from. He would proudly admit that he'd missed his King terribly. There was nothing wrong with missing a platonic friend. A call shook Ban out of his thoughts of the now green-haired fairy king. "Hey, Ban!" the red-headed rock exclaimed, earning Ban's attention. "What do you want?" "We were just talking about how good you were with your fists back there." The nuisance replied. Ban sighed. "What about my brawling?" he asked. The rock grinned. "You were awesome. I can't believe you beat up a bunch of villains with your bare fists. You didn't even use your quirk," he said happily. Can you teach us how to be as efficient in fighting as you? No. Why not? The redhead questioned. Because I have millennia of experience in fighting and it was my job at one point in time. So you mean you were a hero? Why'd you quit? The boy asked, confusion all over his face. I was never a hero. Or at least, not a hero in your sense. I never had a license, and before you ask, no, I was never a vigilante. I was a holy knight. I fought for a kingdom. Then I was a criminal, wrongly accused of murder. The rock child, Ban decided he really should learn his name, looked incredulously at Ban, like he'd escaped a mental hospital. Then the detective walked over. Sir, are you by any chance Ban? He asked. Ban, the escaped suspect? Ban looked away, looking for an escape route and confirming the detective's questions. I'm afraid I'm going to have to arrest you. It's unfortunate since you helped in the attack, but we're just not sure whether or not you're a danger to society, and no one even remembers your case details. Ban grunted. He didn't want to be arrested again. Last time he got arrested, it wasn't really fun. There was no pain, no torture, just darkness. Ban turned around, as if to let the detective put the cuffs on, and bolted. He could hear the detective groan behind him, but he didn't care, he was getting away no matter what. Then King appeared. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku groaned in annoyance when Ban bolted, leaving a groaning detective and some bewildered students, who continued their conversation. Izuku floated quickly after Ban, soon catching sight of him. He was still running at max speed, so Izuku had to float beside him to keep up. What are you doing? He asked. I'm running. I don't want to get arrested again. The new prisons are boring, just darkness, nothing else. Well, they do feed me 3 times a day, but still. It's boring as hell. Ban yelled. Izuku called Oslo and asked him to open a portal in front of the still-running Ban. Ban ran into the portal, not hesitating or stopping at all, and Izuku followed, expecting some quality entertainment. He was not disappointed, as Ban ran full speed through the portal into Izuku's room and crashed into the bed, giving up much like Mr. Aizawa had earlier that day. He tripped over the bed frame and fell face first onto the bed, groaning a bit. Izuku chuckled, then he went back to the USJ area. When he came through the portal, he saw the detective talking to Mr. Aizawa and a sick, skinny blonde that Izuku identified as All Might. Hey, detective. I'm back. I lost him, he just sorta disappeared. I'm sorry. Izuku lied, he did not lose Ban. Ban didn't disappear and he was most certainly not sorry, but his act was convincing enough and the detective left it at that. Izuku called his classmates over and they huddled together, listening to what Izuku was going to say to them. Okay guys? You know that guy with turquoise hair that was just here who ran? Izuku was met with many nods, 20 to be exact. So, his name is Ban and he was a suspect for a mass murder a couple hundred years ago. He got caught and recently escaped. He's my good friend, so I'd appreciate it if you guys helped me cover up that he's living with me. So when the detective asks what happened, please leave out the part where I called Oslo, the big dog that teleports stuff. I know you guys are interested in talking to him, which means that he can't be caught, otherwise he's going to be hidden away for quite a long time. Izuku said. He was met with 20 more nods, which satisfied him. His friend probably wouldn't get caught. Hey Midoriya, what are you spacing out for? The detective said we should all go back to the school's main building to change. Out of our hero costumes. Then we can go home. Someone yelled. Izuku didn't pay attention to who it was though, he just turned his back on the USJ and walked to the bus, where his new friends were waiting. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. Ochako went home after the USJ attack, school was cancelled for a week after it, so she was now sitting on her couch at home, thinking about the mysterious voice. Ochako could feel herself dozing off, but she didn't want to sleep. She wanted to think about the voice. Eventually she gave up and fell asleep. When she woke up, she was covered in a very heavy blanket. She pushed it off and got up, making her way to the door when she spotted it. When she pushed the door open, she was faced with a nice-looking living room connected to a kitchen. In the living room, there was a girl who looked a bit like her, except for her purple eyes. She was sitting on a couch eating, something and finishing up a very big book? Hello. Ochako asked cautiously. The girl turned around quickly and smiled. Hi. I'm Diane. I believe we talked earlier today, yes. She said. Ochako sighed in relief, knowing that this girl was probably not dangerous. So, Diane, where exactly are we? I'm Uraraka Ochako, by the way. She asked. Diane smiled. I've been reading this manual. It's called The Soul's Guide to the Mindscape. It says that we're currently in your mindscape. Apparently whenever we're here, we don't need to eat or sleep and there's tons of stuff to do. From books to video games? Whatever those are. Anyways, there's 3 rooms other than this one. There's my room, your room, and the control room. She said, pointing to the 3 doors in the room. I don't really get it. What do you mean by mindscape? She asked. So, your consciousness will come here when your body rests or when I take over. I'm not mean, so I'll tell you when I'm going to take over forcefully and I'll ask for permission when I'm not taking over forcefully. Deal? Okay, great. Anyways, the magenta door is the control room, and you just put the blanket on top of you and you'll be back in the outside world. The manual also says that when the body runs out of energy, you'll fall asleep and not be able to wake up until some kind of timer is done. Yeah. I think that's about it. How did you end up here? Ochako asked. I don't know. I think I died and then got sealed into your body, but it could be something totally different. Now, you are going to teach me about these torture tools in the kitchen. Ochako blinked. Torture tools? Well, Katsuki Bakugo, age 15. Unlike Uraraka, Katsuki did not go straight home after the attack. Instead, he went to an arcade. He stayed at the arcade and played games until the sun set. He played Dancing Dancer Revelations, which he was a god at, Stumpy Marker Brothers, which he was admittedly only okay, but the extras who played with him SED, earning him the top score in the arcade, and Street Fisher XLVII 47, which he used to make kids cry because they SED and he was, and still is, awesome. The sun was setting as he beat his September 14th-year-old challenger in Street Fisher, making him cry and run home. Katsuki decided that he would go home. He'd caused enough unneeded tears for the day and he was really FING tired, like me. Hey hag, I'm home. He yelled into the quiet house. Katsuki heard the sound of footsteps before his hag came speed-walking down the hall. Brat, you had me worried. I thought something happened to you at the attack. It was all over the news. The hag yelled, smacking him over the head. Hey, that hurt you, old hag. He yelled back. Did you really think I would let some dumbass villains hurt me? Well, we're just glad that you're all right. His old man said from beside his hag. Katsuki had no idea when he'd gotten there, he just sort of appeared there. Not that he cared. Whatever, I'm going to my room. Katsuki said as he walked to his room, disregarding the rest of the conversation that was one-sided yelling from his hag. When Katsuki got to his room, he sighed and changed into a plain t-shirt and a pair of knee-length shorts, my own pajamas, winky face. Then he flopped down on his big, fluffy bed, face first, exhausted. Katsuki didn't notice when he fell asleep, he only noticed the floating lines that began appearing everywhere, as well as the weird yellow light that was trying to SCK him in. Of course, Katsuki was not a weak person, he was very strong, so he fought back against the yellow light that tugged at him. He fought against the light until he woke up to the sound of his smoke alarm. He looked down at his hands and saw that, sure enough, they were smoking. He cursed, before pulling out his emergency bucket of water that he kept under his bed for undisclosed reasons. He dunked his smoking hands into the bucket, making tons of steam come out and getting rid of the smoke. He could have just stopped using his quirk and then the smoking would have stopped, but in his experience, dunking his hands into water was faster. His smoke alarm stopped making noise, which he sighed at. The stupid thing was dim and expensive, and if it had continued making noises, he would have thrown it out the FING window. That, in turn, would have earned him a nice long scolding. That was when the old hag decided to barge into his room unannounced. Oi brat, dinner's ready. Come down if you want some. She said, then left, not even bothering to shut the door. Katsuki sighed, got up and went to the dining room for dinner. Dinner was surprisingly quiet, with Katsuki ignoring his parents and thinking about his dream. Why lions? What was so special about lions? Katsuki supposed that there was a show about giant mechanical lions saving the universe from dumbass aliens, but that probably had nothing to do with his dream. His dream featured realistic lions. Big, furry, ferocious, male lions. Maybe it held the answer as to why he had a very large birthmark on his back. Or, at least his mother told him he did. He wasn't sure because he simply didn't give a F about big butt birthmarks. He was perfect in every aspect of the word and nothing would change that. Not even FING huge birthmarks. Katsuki shook his head, earning weird looks from his parents. Still, he didn't care. He would proudly say that his parents were idiots and that he was smarter than them. He was a genius. Katsuki put down the now empty bowl of unspecified food and went back into his room to have a look at the stupid expressions that he'd gotten in math for homework, once again. Totally ignoring his, admittedly a little, really, confused, parents. The math was easy and he finished it all without a hitch, before he went and took a very hot shower. Then, he put on a fresh set of clothes before brushing his teeth and flopping back down onto his bed, going back to fighting the overpowering yellow light. Needless to say, Katsuki woke up countless times during the night. All because of his smoke alarm. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. While Katsuki dreamt of lions and held back from destroying important and expensive alarms, Izuku was enjoying his life. Well, enjoying it as much as he could with Ban simply existing and math homework, waiting to be completed. Hey, King, when are you gonna formally introduce me to your friends? Ban asked from his position on the bed. He was lying on his stomach, looking to the side at Izuku, who was sitting at his desk trying to do homework. I'll introduce you when things cool down a bit and police stop actively looking for you. Now can you shut up and let me simplify these dumb expressions? Izuku replied for what felt like the millionth time even though it was only the 84th time. Okay. Calm down. Ban said, grinning slightly. King. What now? Izuku yelled, a bit fed up with Ban's incessant chattering and questioning and turning his spinning office chair to face Ban. When are we gonna go on our next date? Ban asked, grinning cheekily as Izuku sputtered. WHWH wait. What? What DDD date? Izuku stuttered, blushing furiously. You know, the next time we go out together. Ban smiled, looking genuine. He was not being genuine at all, he was just really good at acting. Thousands of years roaming an ever-changing planet made people pick up hobbies and bands just to happen to be acting and teasing King's incarnations. Of course, Izuku did not know that, nor did he need to. Ban, the last outing wasn't a date. I would never date you, idiot. Izuku huffed, twirling his pencil in his hand a bit and then placing it back down on his papers. I don't know. It seemed like a date to me. Just the two of us, going out and shopping. If that's not a date, then please redefine date in the dictionary and on Goggle. Ban sang, successfully making Izuku blush more than what was humanely possible. It was a good thing Izuku wasn't exactly human. Izuku looked down, extremely embarrassed. What was Ban doing? Was Ban trying to kill him with embarrassment and blush? Probably. Izuku resolved himself and looked up, only to find Ban staring right in his face. When had he gotten off the bed? Most importantly, why was he starting to look more and more appealing the more they stared at each other? Izuku felt his heart explode, and he fell limply over his seat, blood spilling freely from his nostrils. Ban age? Ban did not mean to make King faint. He was only teasing him, but apparently the Fairy King had taken it a bit too seriously and now he was hanging limply over his chair, unconscious, and body at the complete mercy of the Fox Sin. Ban liked his lips, scaring maybe just a few of the readers at what he was possibly going to do. He walked out of King's room and into the bathroom, grabbing a bottle of lotion, some chapstick and a box of tissues, before going back to King, whose head still hung limply over the back of his seat and placing the 3 items on his desk. He pushed King's head up, making all the blood spill out instead of pooling in his nose and eventually suffocating him. He took out a couple tissues and wiped most of the blood, then he tore and rolled up another piece of tissue, plugging it into King's nose. He picked up the small boy's body from the office chair and laid him back down on his bed. He grabbed the lotion and poured some on his hands, making sure to rub it around everywhere so that his hands were properly moisturized before he picked up the chapstick as well. He applied the chapstick onto his chapped lips before he laid down on the futon, flipping through an album of King's baby photos that he'd found lying around. It was Inko's turn to make dinner and therefore also his turn to wash the dishes, giving him free time before dinner to find new ways to embarrass King via baby photos. So far, the most embarrassing thing he'd found was a picture of a 3-year-old King standing bored next to an ash blonde who looked to be the same age. The ash blonde kid was holding a piece of paper up to the camera and smiling a perfect 10-10 smile, blissfully unaware of what his paper meant. The paper itself was unimportant, however. On the front of it, in childish handwriting, the blonde had written a message for King. "Izuku will marry me. Hell be my bride way we are big," it said, and it featured a picture of the blonde boy holding hands with King. It couldn't be used to embarrass King unless he knew who the blonde was, but luckily for him, even though he didn't know the blonde's name, he knew the boy was in King's class, which meant that they would likely meet. Ban cackled as he put a plan to embarrass King together. It was going to be flawless and hopefully, Diane would help him. If she didn't, she would still find it incredibly funny. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. When Izuku woke up, he smelled lotion. He decided immediately that Ban, lotion and an unconscious him was a bad mix, so he shot up out of bed, startling Ban, who was looking at some kind of book on the futon. Ban scrambled to his feet and hid the book who knew where before looking at him with a glint in his eyes and a devilish grin. "What are you doing? Why does it smell like lotion? What happened?" was the first trio of questions to shoot out of his mouth at the mischievous turquoise-haired man in front of him. "I'm not doing anything, I was reading a magazine while you slept. I used some lotion to take better care of my hands and you fainted of a nosebleed after our conversation. Here, want some lotion?" Ban replied, handing Izuku some lotion. Izuku graciously accepted the lotion and put some on his own dry hands, rubbing it in vigorously. "Boys, it's dinner time." Izuku's mother's voice rang out. Izuku and Ban walked calmly out of his room, chastiful in Izuku's hands. When they sat down, Izuku sat next to his mother, pointedly ignoring Ban, a bit angry about the teasing and the supposed magazine that he was reading. Izuku knew that Ban wasn't reading a magazine and he was a bit disappointed. Disappointed in himself. Was he so untrustworthy that even Ban, his oldest modern-day friend, wouldn't want to show him what he was reading? Izuku sighed, a bit sad. He slept peacefully in his futon that night, still disappointed in himself. Perhaps, starting tomorrow, he'd try and make himself more trustworthy? Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku sat, along with many of his classmates, in classroom 1A. He clutched Chastiful a bit closer to his chest, a bit nervous about putting his plan into action. A few seats in front of him, some of his classmates started talking, and he couldn't help but eavesdrop. Hey, did you guys see the news last night?" Hagakure said excitedly from her seat, to Ojiro and Shoji, who sat beside her. Ojiro nodded and hummed. Everyone in class appeared on screen for a second. "I feel like I didn't stand out at all." Hagakure sighed. "That's true," Shoji replied bluntly. Ojiro smiled awkwardly. "Well, it is kind of hard to stand out when you're just a pair of gloves, isn't it?" he said, still awkward. Izuku tuned them out, opting to listen to Kaminari, Jiro and Kirishima's conversation instead. But man, they sure made a huge deal out of it, didn't they? Kaminari grinned, leaning back towards Kirishima. "Yeah, I was surprised," Kirishima said. "Can you blame them, though?" Jiro began, turning the two boys' attention onto her. The hero course that keeps making quality heroes was attacked. Siro, who was sitting beside Izuku, joined the conversation. But seriously though, Midoriya and Uraraka were amazing during the attack. I wonder how she did that though, you know? The thing where she became really big. Mineta looked up into the conversation. "Yeah, can you imagine? What those huge soft boo dash. Shut the F up, scum." Kakin yelled before Mineta could finish, though he looked and sounded a bit more tired than usual. Sato decided to start a new conversation with Tokoyami. But I do wonder what Midoriya's quirk really is. He turned the big blue guy to stone, right? But he also has telekinesis. He said, mimicking Izuku finger motions with his hands. Indeed. We should ask Midoriya about it later. Tokoyami replied. Izuku took a mental note to figure out what to say before they asked. Then Ida rushed in, yelling at his classmates. Everyone, class is about to start. Please stop talking and take your seats. He exclaimed, making strange hand motions. We're already in our seats. Shiro began pointing out. You're the only one who's not. Kaminari finished, complimenting Shiro's line. Izuku wondered if they'd really met each other in UA or if they were lying about not knowing each other at the start of the year. Ida clenched his fists and sat down, shaking a bit. Uraraka, who sat behind him, made some cute hand motions and smiled brightly. Don't worry about it, Ida. You were just trying to do your duty as class rep. Mina looked back and smiled at Tsu. She leant back in her chair and almost fell. She was saved by Tsu, who pushed her back up before she fell. Hey Tsu, who do you think will teach homeroom today? I mean, Aizawa's not that badly hurt, but they wouldn't make someone who suffered injuries in a recent terrorist attack teach, would they? She asked. Tsu placed a finger on her chin in thought. I don't know, I think Mr. Aizawa is the type to teach even when he's slightly injured. Tsu started, but before she could finish her though, the door opened to reveal their teacher, as all the students were already in the classroom. Lo and behold, it was Mr. Aizawa, who had a few plasters on his face, but other than that, nothing major. Ida raised his hand almost immediately. Glad to see you're all right, Mr. Aizawa, he exclaimed. The man grunted and walked to the podium in front of the class. My well-being doesn't matter. I've had worse injuries before, he said. More importantly, your fight is not over yet. The class tensed, a few of them muttering things. Fight? Asked Kaken, surprisingly calmly. Don't tell me. Started Kaminari. More villains. Mineta screamed. Mr. Aizawa smacked him on the head with his capture gear. Quiet. Izuku sighed and flopped onto Chastifol on his desk. This was going to be a long day. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. The UA Sports Festival is soon, Mr. Aizawa said in a grave tone, with a serious expression on his face. That's a totally normal school event. Half the class exclaimed. The sports festival. They repeated. Kirishima clenched his fist dramatically. That's a super normal school event he started, before he was cut off by Kaminari's hand in his face. Wait a minute. The blonde started. Is it okay for the sports festival to be held right after villains infiltrated the school? Jiro finished for him. What if they try to attack us again? Bujiro asked. Apparently, they think of it as a show of power to hold the festival right after the villain attack, and that it will show that our crisis management system is firm. Security will be strengthened to 3 times that of any other year, and above all, our sports festival is a good opportunity and it's not something to be cancelled because of some villains who didn't even do that much damage. Mr. Aizawa explained. But it's a good reason to cancel the sports festival. I mean, it's just a sports festival, right? Mineta mumbled. Izuku ignored him in favor of letting Mr. Aizawa continue on. Our sports festival is one of the biggest events in the country. In the past, the Olympics were called a festival of sports, and the world was crazy for them. As you know, with reductions in scale and population, they're now but a shell of their former glory. And now, what has taken the place of the Olympics in Japan is our sports festival. Mr. Aizawa told the class. Yaoyorozu decided to explain it further to Mineta. All the top heroes of the country will be watching, you know. Yaoyorozu clenched her fist, looking more determined than anyone had ever seen her before. For scouting purposes. She finished. Kaminari continued the unnecessary explanation. After we graduate, it's normal to join a pro agency as a sidekick. Kaminari looked at Jiro and put his thumb up. Jiro rolled her eyes. A lot of people don't go independent after that and stay sidekicks forever, though. She turned to Kaminari with an evil glint in her eyes. Kaminari, I feel like you'd be one of them. Since you're dumb. She teased. Kaminari seemed to deflate before Mr. Aizawa took over the explanation. Of course, joining a famous, higher-ranking agency will get you more experience and fame. Time is limited. If you want to go pro, this event is the door to your future. Mr. Aizawa informed them. 1 chance every year, a total of 3 chances. No aspiring hero can afford to miss the UA Sports Festival. If you understand that, then work hard on your preparations and don't slack off. Mr. Aizawa exclaimed with an uncharacteristic flair. Yes, sir. Most of the students chorused. Izuku just sat there, contemplating whether to invite Ban to watch the sports festival, or to just leave him to figure it out on his own. Homeroom is dismissed. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Even though stuff happened. Kirishima began in the general direction of Tokoyami and Sato. I'm still getting really excited. He yelled to the ceiling. Izuku raised an eyebrow in his direction, going completely unnoticed, before turning back down to Chastiful and Uraraka, who was chattering animatedly to him. If we put on a show and stand out, we'll have taken the first step to going pro. Siro said as he nudged Kirishima with his weird elbow. Everyone's so dramatic nowadays. Izuku sighed under his breath. I guess that's what a few thousand years will do to a species though. Uraraka stopped chattering for a second, tilting her head in Izuku's direction. Did you say something? She asked. Izuku shook his head and Uraraka brushed it off, resuming her chatter as though there was no interruption. So like I was saying, there was this Huagi swarm of bugs. She exclaimed, her hands making a large circular motion. Ah man, coming to you was worth it. Sato continued the conversation Izuku was paying attention to. We are only given a few chances. We must not miss any of them. Tokoyami said, shaking his head. Izuku's attention was drawn away from Tokoyami, Kirishima, Sato and Siro's conversation by Hagakure saying something to Ojiro. Kind of nervous now. Was all Izuku caught of the sentence, but he assumed that Hagakure was just telling Ojiro that she was getting nervous. Ojiro was smiling at the invisible girl, listening quietly to her excited talking. I need to stand out at the sports festival. Hagakure continued, cheering. Why yeah, but you have to try really hard, or the pros might not notice you. Ojiro replied, sweat dropping slightly. Izuku shifted his attention over to the blackboard, where Koda was cleaning it. Aoyama was standing beside the timid boy, twirling around and spewing nonsense about standing out too much. Koda didn't say anything to him, only nodding profusely when Aoyama got too close to his face. Izuku's attention was swept away by Kaminari complimenting Shoji on his brawn. There's no point if I can't prove myself useful. Shoji replied modestly. Jiro brought a hand up to cover her mouth, as though she'd thought of something funny, which she quickly shared with the rest of her social group. I bet you'll stand out a lot, with your quirk. She laughed. An image of a Kaminari who'd used his quirk too much came to the forefront of everyone's mind and Kaminari trembled in embarrassment. I wonder if it'll be like the Vasil fighting festival. Izuku thought aloud before realizing what he'd said. Vasil? Ida asked, slightly confused. What's that? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Izuku shook his head. Anyways, everyone's getting super fired up. Izuku observed. You're not? Ida asked before he quickly stood up, out of his chair. We've all enrolled here to become heroes and this is one of our biggest chances to make an impression on society. Of course everyone's getting fired up. You have a unique way of getting fired up, Ida. Azui said, preparing to eat lunch with Ishido. It's weird. Do you not feel the same, Midoriya? Ida asked, his hands moving in weird robot chops. Not really. Izuku wanted to reply. He'd seen far more interesting things than a school sports festival, even one belonging to a school for heroes. Instead he replied, Of course I do. Suddenly, a dark atmosphere surrounded them, and Uraraka appeared, an expression befitting a demon on her face. Let's all do our best at the sports festival. She growled. Izuku beamed at her. Yes, let's. He agreed. While Ida was busy inspecting Uraraka's face, Ishido popped up in between the two boys and asked what was going on. You don't look carefree at all, even though that's what your name means. She pointed out. A small blush appeared on Mineta's face, and Izuku wanted to bury him 6 feet deep. The boy opened his mouth to say something, when Azui slapped him over the head with her tongue. Izuku sent her a thumbs up, disguised as a command for Chastifol, and she winked at him. Everyone! Uraraka growled once again, grabbing the attention of the classmates around her. She pumped a fist up in the air and growled once again. I'm going to do my best. Ashido, Ida and Azui pumped their fists up in a cheer with her. Seemingly satisfied, she turned her attention to the group of 4 boys on her left. Once again, she pumped her fist up and cheered that she was going to do her best. The 4 boys, Sato, Siro, Kirishima and Tokoyami, cheered with her less enthusiastically. What's going on though? Your personality's all over the place. One of them asked, after the cheer. Uraraka didn't reply, she simply cheered once again. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku floated along the hall, Chastifol in hand, chatting idly with Uraraka when he remembered a question he wanted to ask her. Why do you want to be a hero? He said out of the blue. I need the money. She replied, embarrassed. I see. Izuku said. Wait, that's it? No more questions asked. Uraraka asked, slightly dubious. Why would I need to know more? Izuku said. A hero is a profession as well, and everyone needs money to survive in this day and age. Why shouldn't you become a hero for the money? Well. It's just that you all have much more noble reasons. You're all here because of some sentimental thing that happened in the past while I'm here for money. I feel like I'm just being greedy compared to you. Uraraka admitted. That's fine though, isn't it? Ida piped up, his hands doing funny things again. Wanting to support yourself isn't greed or something to be ashamed about. Although it is unexpected. He confessed. My family owns a construction company, you see. But we haven't gotten any work, so we're completely broke. She explained, pushing some hair out of her face and looking away shyly. Construction. Ida repeated, bringing his hand up to his chin in a thinking position. It makes sense. With her quirk, she could bring costs way down if she got licensed. Izuku pointed out. She could negate the need for a crane. My thoughts exactly. Ida agreed. I know, right? That's what I told my dad when I was little, but... She paused as though she was recalling a memory of the past. He wouldn't let me. He said he wanted my dreams to come true. Uraraka said, clenching the hem of her skirt. That's why. I must become a hero and make enough money for us to all go to Hawaii together and for my parents to live a happy, easy life. She finished, looking up at the 2 boys with determination burning in her warm chocolate eyes. Ida brought his hands up slowly, before he began applauding the girl in front of him. Then, All Might appeared in a loud flash of American glory. Young Midoriya! He exclaimed, pointing to the boy in question. Yeah? What do you want? Izuku asked, slightly annoyed at the sudden intrusion. Lunch. All Might began, lifting up a lunchbox wrapped in a baby blue cloth with a puppy pattern on it. Honestly, I could reference the anime cloth exactly, but I like puppies, so take that, smiley face. Wanna eat it together? Izuku sighed, but complied anyways, leaving his 2 friends behind with a small wave. He followed All Might to who knew where. Eijiro Kirishima, age 15. Eijiro was just starting to befriend Bakugo at lunch, when the blonde in question drifted off to sleep. Bakugo's head flopped onto the table, startling Eijiro. Bakugo! He began hesitantly. Are you all right? Bakugo did not respond. Eijiro gently rolled the blonde's head to face himself. He looks so peaceful in his sleep. Eijiro observed. No kidding, Kaminari said. He looks like a little dog or something when he sleeps. The F, do you want? Bakugo suddenly screamed in his sleep, his voice echoing throughout the cafeteria and catching the attention of multiple people. His palms began smoking and soon started exploding in his sleep. Eijiro pushed and shoved Bakugo hard, but the blonde remained sleeping and exploding. Eijiro didn't know what to do, so he backed away from the table, afraid anything he did would hurt the blonde boy. However, Bakugo soon calmed down. His hands still smoked, but his snarl was gone. Do you know someone by the name of Harlequin? He goes by King now though. Bakugo asked in his sleep. Katsuki Bakugo, age 15. Katsuki hadn't been getting enough sleep. It was because of his weird lion dreams, he was sure of it, but he didn't know how to stop them. That was why it came as no surprise to him when he found himself back in the black place filled with lions, his only company the golden light. Katsuki. The light seemed to say, reaching out to touch him. The F, do you want? He yelled, igniting his hands. I am a scanner. The light said instead. Suddenly, the light grew until it exploded and in a flash of golden light, Katsuki found himself in a forest clearing standing in front of a tall, ginger man with a mustache and a large axe. I wish to pass my ability on to you. I think you will be a fine sin of pride. Katsuki had heard the sins thing before. He'd never heard the name Escaner, but he knew that the strange man had something to do with Izuku. Do you know someone by the name of Harlequin? He goes by King now though. Katsuki asked the strange man. Escaner's eyes flashed in recognition. You've met him? Katsuki nodded. I see, then that will make my job easier. I trust he's explained everything to you? Katsuki nodded again. Escaner nodded before he started glowing golden. My time is almost up, you see. I've been lingering in this world for many thousands of years, searching for a good successor, and I chose you. You have enough pride to become a good successor, so I shall transfer my ability to you. It's called Sunshine, and it allows my power to grow as the sun rises and drop as the sun sets. I do not know how it will work for you, but I believe it will be something you can activate and disable during the day. Escaner slowly approached Katsuki, who had no reason to back away, and promptly flicked him on the forehead, blowing his body to pieces along with half the forest that surrounded the clearing. Katsuki screamed in pain once as his body fell apart and once again as it knitted itself back together. The transfer seems to have failed. No matter, I shall try again. Ochako Uraraka, age 15. I feel Escaner's energy. A voice rang in Ochako's head as she chatted with Ida about Midoriya having lunch with All Might. Diane. Ochako replied, Who's Escaner? The question was barely finished when a yell sounded throughout the cafeteria. Bakugo had randomly started yelling again. The yell was followed by a quiet PRD, after which Bakugo started screaming in pure unbridled agony. What's going on? Ochako yelled. I think Escaner's transferring his ability. Diane replied. I'm going to take over now, okay? Ochako's nod and eye color change went unnoticed by all but one. Eijiro Kirishima, age 15. Eijiro watched in horror as a person he considered his friend began screaming in unfiltered agony. Bakugo stood up in his sleep and began glowing golden before the light flashed and the boy screamed in pain. One of his eyes exploded into a horror show of blood before seemingly regenerating in a short wisp of golden light. Amazingly, the blonde boy's eyes were still firmly shut in a sleeping position throughout all the commotion. Hey, Bakugo? Eijiro tried just in case his friend was awake. Are you all right? Bakugo did not respond, but his body glowed golden once again and another scream pierced the air. Bakugo's other eye burst, and blood exploded from this wound, splashing all over those closest to him, Eijiro, Jiro, and Kaminari. His eye did not regenerate this time. Eijiro sincerely hoped this wasn't a common occurrence for his new friend. He didn't think anyone deserved that kind of pain. Izuku Midoriya, age 15. Izuku was chatting with All Might about what had happened at the USJ when he felt the overwhelming presence of Escaner as well as heard Kaken scream. Excuse me, All Might. I have to go now, it's quite urgent. Izuku said, before grabbing Chastifol and speeding off in the direction of the cafeteria. There were another 2 screams before he arrived at the cafeteria, where all the students were surrounding Kaken and a couple teachers who were trying to figure out what was going on. In the crowd, he spotted Diane making her way towards the poor boy who was receiving Escaner's power. Izuku floated high above the crowd and made a beeline towards Diane, who looked like she was about to grow in size just to get through the crowd. Diane told, as he instructed Chastyful's guardian form to lift her. Hey King! We have to hurry, or that child may not last. Diane exclaimed, pointing towards the center of the crowd. From what I've heard, he's already lost an eye and 3 fingers. I know. Izuku replied as he floated then towards Kakin. They dropped down into the center of the crowd, separating the child from the teachers, before turning to the blonde boy himself. Izuku reached a hand out towards Kakin's glowing form, connecting his spirit to the 2 spirits currently residing in Kakin's body. He shut his eyes and concentrated. When Izuku reopened his eyes, he saw he was in a clearing. Well, what used to be a clearing? All that remained of the no doubt great forest that surrounded the clearing was a single weeping pine tree. An explosion caught Izuku's attention and he looked in the direction it came from to see a day-form Escaner trying to pass his power onto a slowly dying Kakin. Izuku commanded Chastyful to go ahead of him before he raced towards the pair himself. When he got close enough to see them, he told Chastyful to go into Pollen Garden form and heal Kakin while he went to talk to Escaner. Hey, Escaner! He yelled, waving his hand. The tall, muscular man turned towards him, and a look of recognition crossed his face. King. The man replied. It has been far too long since I last met any of you. It's good to see you. Same here. Izuku said. Now, what do you think you're doing, trying to transfer all your power to him at once? Can't you see he's dying? I saw that. I merely believed his pride and would help him adjust to the power. Escaner replied. I've yet to truly damage him. How about you try to transfer Sunshine slowly, gradually increasing the output until his body can handle it? Izuku suggested. I think I will continue to do it my own way. Please remove your sacred treasure. Escaner told him. Izuku sighed. I'll remove Chastyful after he's completely healed. No arguments or haggling. Izuku turned and crossed his arms, a slight pout on his face. Then you leave me no choice but to forcibly remove you from the boy's mind. Escaner said. Izuku's eyes widened and he took off as fast as he could, Escaner right on his tail. No, I'm not leaving until the transfer is complete. Izuku yelled to the ginger man following him. Escaner said nothing, he simply raised Rita and swiped. Izuku dodged, taking the opportunity to turn in another direction while Escaner slid past his turn. It did not take long for Escaner to catch up, and the second time he swung Rita, it connected with King and he went flying out of Kakin's realm. Izuku opened his eyes with a gasp. The surrounding crowd had not dispersed and all the people around him were staring with anticipation. Diane gave a questioning look towards Izuku, who shook his head. A blinding light shone over the crowd, more vivid and bright than anything else the explosive boy had produced thus far. Kakin shone and shone until, suddenly the light disappeared. Narrator, age, 780,890,932,896. The light shone, bright and far, covering the entire crowd that had gathered around the screaming, glowing boy. It shone and shone, brighter and brighter, until suddenly, like a light bulb, the light went out and the boy began floating. Up and up he went, higher and higher, until he was but 3 inches away from the ceiling of his school cafeteria. He stopped there. His eyes blinked open with the shining gold of 1.3 billion volts of electricity. He opened his mouth for another scream, what would be the loudest yet, but nothing came out. Finally, his body began to glow gold with the overflowing energy once again. And then, Katsuki Bakugo exploded into a very large amount of dust, creating a nebula of colors in the cafeteria of UA High.